All right, we're going to call to order the Thursday, May 2nd, 2019 Parks and Recreation Commission meeting. All right, so now if we could do roll call.
Okay. Roll call. Commissioner Murphy.
I'm present.
Commissioner Jacobson.
Present.
Vice Chair Taylor.
Present.
Chair Ittner.
Here.
Commissioner Firestone. Here. Commissioner Comerford.
Present.
Oh, and I skipped
We're,
the pledge of
all,
allegiance, so
we're all
let's
here.
go back
We
to
skipped
that.
the pledge. Well, let's
Thank
go
you.
to the pledge now.
Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, so are there any public comments that are not about an agendized item? No? Okay, great. And if anyone else would like to speak on an item, the blue cards are there, so please bring it on up. We don't have any presentations tonight. Sergeant Coppingen. I'm sorry, Deputy what? Oh, they're right here on the
Right there on the table. Or did they all get
Yeah,
used up?
they're right there, Councilman.
Come on up. I'm sorry, I missed your name.
Deputy Peter on
Okay.
behalf of Sergeant Coppingen.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank
Hello.
you.
Hi. Hi.
That's it? I don't think that was me, actually. So.
So usually we just have a report on things that are happening in the parks and around the city or related to parks, so.
Okay. I haven't worked in the city for quite some time, but I do know that some of the business owners within the arcade have had complaints of some of the local transients just being in the area, just kind of lounging around. And from the times that I've responded to the calls, they're not committing any crimes. They're not drinking out in public or anything of that nature. So, we very politely asked them if they would mind moving. But at that time, they have the opportunity to stay. As I stated, they're not committing a crime or anything like that. I feel as if we've done a good job keeping the gazebo clear, because I know that was a very big issue. The cameras that we've implemented have done very well. There's been numerous emails sent out about the use of the cameras, and we implemented the laws very strict and kind of got the point across. So from my understanding, the gazebo has been open and clear. So I think right now the big thing is just speaking with some of the store owners within the arcade, just trying to get them to understand that, if there's no crimes being committed, there's nothing we can do. Other than that, I know that there's been some graffiti in the area. We currently have several deputies assigned to dealing with the graffitis and trying to put a case together against some of the local juveniles in the area that we believe may be doing the graffiti. It's just difficult with no cameras seeing them, but we're doing our best. Some of them are on probation, things like that, so we're checking in on them, seeing if they have any gang paraphernalia or graffitis that match the items that have been spray painted, so then we can link everyone together.
Are the cameras in the park trained at the gazebo, are they fixed or are they able to be adjusted from a control center to scan?
I believe they're fixed.
Okay.
But I'm not 100% sure, but I believe they're fixed.
Okay.
And with the graffiti, that isn't in the parks though, it's just generally around the city, or has it been specific to the parks?
I apologize. I'm not exactly sure. I know I've seen some behind the Vons
Okay.
on Maricopa, I can't recall if any have been in any of the parks.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Anybody have any questions? Thank you very much for
All
coming.
right.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, next up is a Public Works report, but I am not seeing Greg Grant, so,
Mark, do you want to?
Yeah, he's,
okay.
Unavailable.
So no Public
no,
Works
no,
tonight.
no
Okay.
Public Works update or report.
All right, on to minutes. Thank you. Has everybody had a chance to review them?
Can I get a copy of them?
Okay.
Oh, you didn't get. There's extra on the table. Do you need yours back? Do you want another? I can
I'm
go
gonna need
grab-
one to sign for you.
Yeah, I'll go grab
Can
one.
I get one too?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any comments? All right.
I move that we accept the minutes as written.
I'll
I second it.
Okay. Have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Right. Thank you. Oh, thank you. All right, so the next item on our agenda is a discussion item on pickleball. So I think we'll open up the public comment period and have people come up, and I'll start calling the cards.
Sure. And
We're
Chair,
gonna-
can we, I just want to say, when you do come up to speak, if you could just state your name loudly. The person who does our minutes, from the last meeting, they couldn't hear the names of the speakers, so if you could, when you come up to the podium, say it like you mean it.
And there is a
And-
time limit,
Yeah,
correct?
that's what I was just gonna say.
Time limit.
We're gonna have the lights on. It'll be 3 minutes per person, and we'll let you know when your time is up. So the first card I have is for Jeff Palmer. It's not working?
No, I don't know, I'm gonna ask I'll ask James.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my name is Jeff Palmer. I live here in the Valley, and I wanted to talk a little bit about pickleball. Last night, I play pickleball quite a bit with the group that's playing over at Matilah Junior High School. Last night, I was able to play with my wife and my teenage son, who's a sophomore at the high school. He likes to be good at things, and when he's not good at things, he doesn't like them. Well, pickleball was really easy for him to pick up, and so he's enjoying it, but he's getting too quick for some of us older folks, so we might send him home. I started a long time ago when I was young, like him, playing tennis. I love tennis. I think sometimes when we talk about issues in our community, sometimes it's one or the other, and it's tennis or pickleball. And really what I want to say is I love tennis. I love the tennis tournament. It's a great time of year for the community. There's lots of people that love tennis. But I'm getting too old, and my knees are just not what they were. And so pickleball is a much more enjoyable sport for me now. It's also great exercise, and it's also a more cozy sport, meaning you can talk to your partner and the other team. So it's really something we enjoy. What I really wanted to say is I think there's room for a discussion and about not win or lose, not one party versus the other, tennis or pickleball. I think there's room for both. This community doesn't have resources for everything. There's a lot of limited resources. And is there a way when we can sort of find time for both pickleball and tennis to play? I just went by the lower tennis courts on my way here, and 3 of the 4 courts were empty. So there maybe is some time, maybe not all the time. I know that part of the time of the day, the tennis courts are in heavy use. Some of that is for outside private parties, which is great. It's a great resource. But there also maybe is a time when there can be some set aside for potentially pickleball. If there's a group put together to talk about issues and make presentations to you, I would be more than happy to volunteer to work with such a group. But I just wanted to say I think there's an opportunity for win-win here. It's a small community. We don't have resources. All of the gyms are used for basketball and volleyball. All the fields are used for AYSO and five-a-side and soccer and softball. And maybe there's an opportunity to have a discussion about pickleball and tennis. So I'd be happy to answer any questions or serve on a committee if you wanted to do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is Tim Kraut.
Tim Kraut, 230 Saddle Lane, Ojai. I just want to tell you about last weekend. I flew back to Hot Springs, Arkansas, played in a pickleball tournament. 250 to 300 people, had a blast, met a bunch of new people, nice people, had fun. Just, it's a great sport. The sport is growing. It's growing like crazy. And I know that you guys you're between a rock and a hard spot here with the tennis people and us. And again, I'm not against tennis. I'm not, just for pickleball. I think that maybe we can do both. So it's up to you guys to come up with a solution, and I know that's going to be tough for you because you got a lot of opposition. But again, it's a great sport. It's growing. Young and old can play it. And I just wanted to read one thing here from your guide, the activity guide for a recreation department. Mission statement: the Ojai Recreation Department seeks to enhance the physical and mental well-being of Ojai citizens by creating and offering a wide variety of accessible activities. Let's do that. Thank you.
Thank you. And next is Jim McCarthy. Okay.
Jim McCarthy, I live in Miners Oaks, and I'm a pickle person. Yeah, I just started in October, and having played tennis a good part of my life, and it's not practical for me to try to do that now for physical reasons, and pickleball is great. I think, as you all know, most of the people here in town, we've been playing over at Matilaha Junior High, and it's pretty nice over there, and we're pretty cozy over there. The problem is that there's tennis court lines but not pickleball lines, and they don't want us to add any further lines, so we, at this point now, have to snap lines with a chalk line like a carpenter would use. And then those blow away, and then we have to do it again. So this is an ongoing thing, as well as setting up nets, which isn't that big of an issue at all. But the lines, it's time consuming and takes away from being able to get out and exercise and play the game. So I just wanted to mention that. And the other thing that I've been thinking about is that since the meeting that I also attended at the city council here a week or so ago, and there were plenty of tennis folks here talking about, sounded to me like it was fairly overwhelmingly against having pickleball at the lower courts. I heard one pretty decent argument, and I heard a number of arguments, but in my mind, again, as to why people are against pickleball, in my mind there was one that I could take seriously, but I also want to say that I'm saying this because I'm biased, and so you have to, of course, take that into consideration. But one of the arguments made was a guy came up and with a tennis racket and a pickleball paddle and showed that pickleball is a little louder than tennis is. So I appreciate that. I don't know from an unbiased point of view what that means to people playing tennis 100 feet away or 50 feet away, or whatever, but it struck me as something that was valid. The other arguments, well, so let me just wrap up by saying I try to consider myself a fair thinking person, and I'm interested to hear more of the feelings and arguments and reasons why people who play tennis at Libby courts oppose the pickleball being played there as well. So thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next is Carolyn Burke.
Hi, my name's Carolyn Burke. I'm speaking tonight as president of the Ojai Valley Tennis Club. And as a club, we have shown our commitment to creating a tennis facility at Libby Park, not only for our use, but also for the use of the city of Ojai and the community members as a whole for over 100 years. Historically, as will be addressed by one of our other presenters tonight, the tennis club has funded a substantial portion of the major construction and maintenance costs for all 8 courts. We provide primary funding to replace nets, we wash courts, replace windscreens. We even purchased a scissor lift for the city to use to replace light bulbs. We also pay a percentage of the cost to repair the bleachers at Upper Libby. The Ojai Valley Tennis Club hosts the Ojai Tennis Tournament the last week of April every year. We just, this last week, hosted our 119th tournament. It's the oldest tournament in the United States in one location. It has more entrants than any other tournament in the world. This event brings people from all over the world to Ojai. They fill our restaurants, our hotels, they shop in our stores, and it brings a lot of exposure to Ojai. The Ojai hosts the Pac-12 championships, the CIF division, juniors, our open division. We have a quick start tournament for local students who also participate, and we use every court at Libby Park. These courts need to be in this pristine condition that we maintain them in order to host these events. Some people think that we only use the courts at Libby for those 5 days of the Ojai, but that's not true. We've created the facility so that the community uses it throughout the year. The city is able to hold their rec department tennis clinics there. It's used daily by Director Scott Burton. It's used by the Wild Tennis Academy, USTA League Play, adults and juniors, other tournaments and youth clinics, and they're well used for all of those events. The Ojai Valley Tennis Club is the primary financial sponsor of the city's recreational tennis program by providing scholarship funds for juniors to participate in these city programs. The amount varies, but it's at least $10,000 a year for scholarships and equipment. For these reasons, the Ojai Valley Tennis Club is opposed to using the courts at Libby Park for pickleball. Libby Park is a historic tennis facility that's been in existence for over 100 years. And I want to be clear, we are not anti-pickleball at all. We just think that there are more viable other locations for them to play. We could find a long-term solution somewhere else, and we'd be willing to work together to find a more suitable place for the pickleball play. Thank you. Appreciate you.
Can I ask a question? Or do we do that later of this presenter?
Well, we usually are, I mean, I think we should we'll go open our discussion and then we can come back to it.
Okay.
Thank you. Mike Borders, please.
My name is Mike Borders, past president of the Ojai Valley Tennis Club. And I don't want to duplicate the remarks I gave at the city council meeting on the 23rd. So I'll real quickly summarize what I talked about there, and that was who the Ojai Valley Tennis Club is. Carolyn has pretty much described what that club is. It's a 501c3 nonprofit formed in 1895, incorporated in 1953. Charitable mission of our entity is to promote the sport of tennis and to provide tennis facilities for the youth of the Ojai Valley. As she mentioned, we have funded Libby Park courts. While they're used for adults, they're primarily, I would say, used for children, at least certain times of the day. So that technicality has not stopped us from funding those courts. Another major player in this whole scenario, which is often overlooked, is the Ojai Civic Association, which actually owned Libby Park. It was deeded Libby Park by Mr. Libby in 1917. They owned and operated the park, including the tennis courts, for about 55 years before they donated the park and the courts to the city in about 1970. And the thought was at the time that the city would take over maintenance of the courts. Unfortunately, the city was short on resources, so over the years, there's been sort of a unique arrangement worked out among the city, the Ojai Valley Tennis Club, and the Ojai Civic Association, where the construction and maintenance expenses have been divided. I think in the early years, it was more or less 1/3 each, but in the last 20 years, given the financial constraints faced by the city, over 85% of the funding of the construction and maintenance of the Libby Park tennis courts has been borne not by the city, but by the Ojai Valley Tennis Club and the Ojai Civic Association. It's about, in the last 20 years, it's about $600,000 of non-city money and about $100,000 roughly of city funds. So it's primarily because of that financial investment that the Ojai Valley Tennis Club and the Civic Association feel they have a significant seat at the table in terms of how those courts are used. We understand that technically and legally, those courts are city assets. So the final decision would, of course, be made by the city, but we would hope we would have significant input. Speaking on behalf of the tennis club, I can tell you that we absolutely intended the dollars we expended would be used to build tennis courts, which would be used for tennis. The operative word is tennis, not for other sports or activities conducted from time to time by the city or the residents of the city.
Okay, and I'm sorry to stop you, but your time is up.
Okay,
Thank you.
that's it.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Mark Wheel?
Hi, my name is Mark Weil.
Weil. Oh, sorry.
That's okay. No. I was doing that for the whoever does the minutes. Make sure you got my name, get the name right. A resident of Ojai, 22 years, and I spoke at the city council meeting. I think Susie, you and Sage were there as well. And I don't want to repeat myself too much. The main thing I want you to understand from all of us is that we are for pickleball. Yes, for it. I'm for it. Just like I was for paddleball and supported the paddleball folks and was so happy that they found the Soul Park venue, and I've gone out to play with them a few times and had a great time. So I think, again, I know we can work something out. It's just still shocking to me that we're even talking about Libby Park as the site. That's all. That's the only issue I have is let's find another site. There are a lot of options that I've just seen on a page back here, including, can I spill the beans, Mike? Yes. About the Chaparral Auditorium possibly too. It's never being used. Put some lines down there. Who cares? We just put chairs on. We do, different activities there that I've been to. Nobody would notice the lines on the court. It's got lights. It's indoors. I don't know if you can drink beer in there, guys, but it's one option, and we can look at a lot of them, and I think we would love to do that with them. And I feel like the Ojai Valley Tennis Club wants to help. We want to help. If they don't know how to fundraise, let's fundraise with you. Let's figure out how to get some lights somewhere back here behind City Hall so you guys can listen to the pickleball all day. I'm kidding. I'm joking. I'm totally kidding. I'm kidding. Councilmember Haney is here, and I know he wanted a discussion, and I think that is absolutely positive, and I love the discussion part of it. But I think Libby Park has to be off the table, and that's my feeling, and I feel like that's historic. That's the right thing. It's the fair thing, and we do have a big stake. We put a lot of investment into that park, and I'm part of the fundraising committee for the Ojai, and we bust butt to get money to fund this tournament and to keep those courts in that park beautiful and in pristine condition. And I feel like it's a little unfair if that's just overlooked and, hey, it's the fastest growing sport in the country and thanks for everything you guys did, but we're going to put some lines down. That's not fair to me, and that's not right. And I think we need to look at exhaust all other options first before we come back to that. This is dangerous, this thing. I think that's it. I don't want to keep on going, but I hope we can find a way to keep it going. And let's move to action and let's go explore. Let's go find some spots. Let's figure out how to help them fundraise and get some lights somewhere and play pickleball all day and night. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Okay. Last card, William Wyrick, please. If anybody else has cards they want to turn in, now's the time.
A couple of things I want to just address you as a member of council and you as council appointees. And I think Councilman Haney is absolutely in the spirit of opening discussion, because there's always important to be looking at the mission of the Park and Rec Department written large. And I think you've heard me before talk about how we need to look at possible arrangements on a wider scale, school system and county, and will we continue to do that? I think this issue has grabbed the council's attention in the sense that we now know we need to have a full vetting and understanding of all the arrangements, the history, and et cetera. And it's been a while since the council's been updated on that. And we've already started that process of asking questions, asking for documentation, and understanding exactly what's fully going on. But already a couple of things have happened that I think are important for us to make sure we focus on facts and accuracy. And for example, one thing that was stated for the record in front of council was someone came up and introduced themselves as the director of tennis for the city of Ojai. I inquired about that, and that position actually, that position does not exist. So that was an independent contractor who was describing themselves as something that is not supported by the documentation. In addition, we asked for you to be provided with the actual usage statistics, not scheduling format. You got a thing in your packet which was a scheduling and not an actual usage. And I think these are the kinds of things that I just wanted to say for the record that the council is going to keep focusing on in terms of getting the documentation, doing the full vetting, making sure that that is shared with the Park and Rec Commission as we go through this process of evaluating how best to fulfill the mission of the Park and Rec Department with due consideration for the historical importance of the Tennis Association and its role in this community. But nevertheless, important that what is represented to the council in this commission is accurate. Thank you.
All right. Any other cards? Would anyone else like to speak? Thank you. Christopher Westcott. You're up. Thank you. Sorry.
Hi. Yeah. Hi, I'm Christopher Westcott. I'm a teacher at the Ojai Valley School. I've been there about 4 years, and I started playing pickleball a couple years ago, and I really enjoy the sport, and it's something that I'd love to see more of it here in Ojai. I know that tennis is a big part of Ojai, but it's a sport that's kind of secondary, but still it's a good sport that I think that more people could be a part of. And I've got to know a lot of people in the community because of the sport, and I've really enjoyed it. And since playing and learning how to play, I've been traveling to like Santa Barbara, I've been traveling to Ventura, and traveling to all kinds of places to play. But I would love to see better facilities here in Ojai so that I could play more locally, and maybe draw in some more people who also like to play on better facilities. And so we travel to those facilities that are much better, but we'd like to play here more often. So I just came here to voice that side of it. So.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay, anyone else? All right, so our public comment period is closed. So then it'll come back to us for discussion. Susie and I were at the council meeting, and I'm hoping some of you saw it online. So sorry. So I think from my perspective, and we had a pretty robust discussion the week before that meeting at our previous commission meeting. So I kind of am looking at this from my perspective as we have two issues. we have how can we, in a temporary fashion, make sure that we are making pickleball available? And how can we, in a long-term capacity, find a permanent solution that suits the pickleball needs? And I kind of see them as complementary but separate. Like the solution for one is different than the solution for the other. So I'd like to open a discussion, but I'm kind of, if we look at it that way, I'd like to maybe discuss it that way, if that works for the commission.
Short-term, long-term?
Yeah.
Yeah, so as some of you may know, and maybe a lot of you don't, I've known Mark for a while, and I am from a little different position in that not to step on Councilman Wyrick, but not the director of tennis, but I ran the tennis program for the Recreation Department for 15 years. So uniquely kind of understand the history of the tennis facility. Also recently have kind of discovered pickleball as an older tennis player with bad knees. They can't do that anymore. So, and I'm hearing a little bit, I think, of a misunderstanding in that nobody, I think, ever suggested that pickleball permanently take over some parts of the Libby Park tennis complex. I don't think that was ever necessarily on the table, as far as I understand. It was looking for a temporary solution to allow the pickleball players to use the court, which seemed like a logical choice, while the city is searching for a better facility or a more permanent facility. And I appreciate, and I'm sorry, the lady that I was going to talk to, that's the president, thank you, of your willingness, and Mark as well, to work together to try to form, I like the fundraising part that you brought up, Mark, to try to work together to come up with an idea, and there are several options on the table. Chaparral was one. Trying to work together with the county and use Soul Park is one. The tennis court right outside the door here that's been unusable for many, many, many years as one. So there are several viable options long-term that we want to explore or need to explore, but we also want to have a temporary solution for the pickleball players. That's a weird term. I don't know how else to say it. The pickle people to have a place to play. And it sounded like the tennis group was amenable to that, of maybe allowing one of the courts to be used. And I understand you have certain tournaments, but for certain periods during the day or certain periods during the year, whatever that may be, to kind of work in unison with the pickleball players. I think both sports can exist side by side, if that's the right term. I've played both. They're both very close. Maybe one's, I think, this might put a little louder than the other, but I don't see that as an issue. I think the goal for us as a commission, as directed by the council, was to come up with a short and long-term recommendation, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, I don't think it was that specific. I think it was sent back to us to continue our process with. I don't think we got specific direction.
Okay.
But I think that is a good approach to it. I think also, to kind of recap our earlier discussion from our previous meeting, it was very clear amongst our commission that we in no way want to do anything that would be detrimental to the courts or to the tennis tournament or to the long-standing wonderful history that the town has with tennis, and that we're very cognizant of not doing anything that would infringe upon any of that. So we were very clear on that. So whatever we're looking at as a temporary solution only works if it does not harm the courts or cause any problems for the long-standing tennis tournament and those things that are already there. And part of what we did ask for when we came back to this meeting was a better look at what's currently going on there, when it's being used, who's using it, and what the schedule is. And so kind of a look, and we have that, and if anyone's interested, it isn't all of the use, but it's a kind of a schedule of who's using it when, and we have some extra copies if anyone wants to grab one. And I think in some ways, that is a good jumping off point for a temporary solution, which is we had a trial where we did it for a period of time, and the feedback from the community was neither, there was no negative feedback. It seemed to work. Of course, everyone would prefer not to have the chalk lines on there, but it wasn't a total impediment to playing tennis there. It was just maybe not as good as having it there, but it was no permanent damage. And so we had asked staff to get back to us on that, and if there were any comments we needed to hear. So that was, we did that for a period, and it seemed to work. So as far as a temporary solution, I'd love to hear what the commission has to say, looking at, now that you've seen the schedule that's come out, that we have to look at, and have a little more discussion on that.
Well, my understanding of the usage of the park in general and the courts within the park, the hierarchy should be public usage first, recreation usage second, and private usage third, i.e. renting the courts out to a group or a private commodity. That seems to be the order of how it should be used. I don't know if everybody agrees or disagrees with that, but that's my understanding.
I don't know that that's policy. I hear what you're saying.
I didn't say it was.
But yeah, but go ahead.
As a
Brian.
practice,
Sorry,
you're saying.
this is kind of taking a step back, but kind of a clarifying question from some of the comments from the discussion. So I think one of the concerns was preserving the pristine condition of the tennis courts. And what we're describing is, like Commissioner Ittner said, temporary, like tape or chalk, not kind of permanently installing nets or painting lines. And if that's kind of your understanding and you still have this concern about kind of preserving the pristine condition of the tennis courts, I'd like to understand kind of what is that? What is the threat from these temporary courts to the condition of the tennis courts?
And I almost feel like from where we're coming from, it's almost, I'd like to turn it over to staff. I mean, to say that we would like to have a temporary solution at Libby in the interim, and with the absolute certainty that it will not damage the courts, there will not be interruption to the tennis tournament, and that as best we can schedule it, will meet all the parameters that are currently in place for scheduling, and see what staff can work out. Because I don't know, I mean, I've heard about chalk being, we can get rid of the chalk, but it's distracting. So there's a lot of information that we don't have to make that decision. But I would like to see, in the short term, a Libby court available to pickleball to use while we work on a long-term solution. So
Well, if I may, go ahead, Margaret.
Yeah, well, I think Jim brought up the noise level. I feel strongly about the noise level disturbing tennis players. I do. It's very, very, very distracting. And I think that's something that really has to be taken under consideration, even for a temporary measure at Libby. And the other thing is, we have not really investigated the existing court that, Jim, I think you play on, correct? It's all?
Which court?
The one at Soul Park?
Oh, there's one there.
Yeah, you've played on there, right? Because you said in our last meeting that, there was some construction that needed to be addressed, right?
There's one pickleball court at Soul Park.
Mm-hmm.
That's operational?
Yeah, it is.
So, I mean, I think that we should not ignore that. That should be definitely up there for us to, investigate. And I know that the lights are something that, you need to have if you're going to play there at night. But again, that can all be accomplished if we work together, like Mark had said, with fundraising.
There's one court.
If you wouldn't mind, Jim, if you wouldn't mind coming up to the mic.
There's one court at Soul Park for pickleball,
Right.
and it's great. It's a great court. On a daily basis, let's see, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then Saturday mornings, that's not enough to have one court, because there's 8, 12. Yesterday, there were 13 people playing when I was there. So
But
that's with
At
doubles.
least that's one,
That's one, sure.
right?
Yeah.
And so,
I just wanted to clarify
One set of four, or
that.
Yeah.
one only so
One court.
one court?
Yeah.
One.
So
So that's really a striping issue, because if they're using one pickleball court, it could easily be turned into,
no, it's just
No.
one pickleball court.
it's just
Period.
like a concrete
Period.
pad of, I see,
Yeah,
okay.
it's just one.
Separate, it's not on a tennis court,
The
it's
rest
its
of the
own.
courts
Okay.
are, there's a paddleball court, and then there's 1 or 2 that are in disrepair that, from what I've seen, no one plays on.
Now,
Okay,
There's only one.
and that park closes at dark, or at, right, and no lights?
and it costs money to get in.
Cost money.
Right.
but how much? It's not,
Well, unless you have a pass for the year, it's $4 a day to get in.
mm-hmm.
Weekends.
If you're over
$2
60
a
or
weekdays.
65, I think it's only $25 a year.
Mm-hmm.
I know that because my wife goes to take our dog.
And then you'd be standing around waiting for your chance to get on one court.
Right, one.
Well,
So,
Eric and I, we'll get into this later, we visited Carpinteria, not for pickleball, not for tennis. It was for information regarding a swimming pool. And one of the issues that was brought up was the fact that there is no pickleball court in Carpinteria. They go to Santa Barbara and they pay. So there's a lot of towns that are in this similar situation, a lot. And I think that we have the advantage of having, wonderful, people that want to do some fundraising. They want to help each other do it. And I think that's the route to go. We need to help the pickleball players find a place. And, it will work. It will work.
I think I tend to believe that I'm kind of a linear thinker, and it seems to me that the next logical step would be, let's get a representative of the pickleball people, a representative of the tennis club, Mark, and Soph, or whomever is going to be assuming that position, and have a meeting and try to work out a reasonable schedule.
well,
I'm not sure
and-
why
and-
temporarily why it's even come to this level for this kind of
I agree with
an
you.
issue.
I agree with you.
And then, once that's done, which I don't think should be overly difficult to do, we're all adults, is then allow us as a commission to work with the council to find a long-term solution,
Yeah.
a facility,
Yeah.
a place for that. That seems to be a logical step.
Yes. I
so it
think
sounds like what
too.
we're wanting to do is create a temporary situation at Libby
Mhm.
that will work, that we won't be damaging the courts. It will be non-invasive to the tennis tournament or any of those long-standing events that are part of the tennis association, but that would allow access to the courts, one court. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
because.
And then we will then, as a next step, I would hope, form a committee to work on this, like
Mm-hmm.
you're saying, and brainstorm some of what we already know and put it on paper. Because we've gotten a lot of really good feedback and a lot of good ideas about possible permanent homes for pickleball, and then work from there.
And I think the important thing to realize is we have no control over Soul Park. So
No, I
that would
know
have to
that.
be a partnership with Soul Park.
Yeah.
We have no control over what we can do with the various schools and their court availability. That's up to the school district. What we do have to offer is basically Libby Park. That's it. That's the only option that I think we have as a commission, an opportunity to try to work together with the tennis association, the rec department, and the pickleball people to try to come with a short-term solution for that. Temporary being a very important word
Right.
in there, until we find or can come up with a better plan. And we have voiced several options
Yeah.
that I think are very viable options and could happen relatively quickly, I think within the next year, if not before that, to give the pickleball community a place of their own to play and grow. And to comment on the tennis tournament, which I think is great. I mean, nobody likes the history of tennis in this valley more than I do, but we also have the opportunity to get on the front end of the growing pickleball tournament thing that's happening. I have friends in Arizona where pickleball tournaments are 300 to 400 to 500 people. Tim just came back from Arkansas, right? Which has a huge community. Santa Barbara has tournaments that have 300 and 400 people in them. We can get ahead of this thing and maybe make it a destination possibility, and that's a big thing to do. That would mean lots and lots of courts, and I don't know where we are with that. But we could either get in front of it or we could chase it. I would like to think that we could get ahead of it, but that's just my own personal opinion.
I would like to ask Tim if it was possible to have a temporary pickleball court at Libby. What would you do for the courts? What would what would be the taping, the preparation, the cleaning up, all of that?
Real quick, I could put four courts on one Libby court, snap lines, put up temporary nets, and that's it. I could have it down in one day.
So in other words, am I understanding you that if you put them up in the morning, they would be down at night?
No, I'm saying if you needed to be taken down, we could have it down in a day, power wash the court, and that's it. But I think, if I recall right, the last meeting that commissioners had, Mr. Murphy had an idea of taking one court. The pickleball community gets to use that one court. We put 4 temporary net systems on it, leave those net systems on, snap 1/8 thick line, which is very minimal. We could remove that in one day.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, so if that were to happen, and everything's an if at this point, and the Tennessee Association needed that court for a tournament on a weekend, or I know they have family tournaments in December, I know there's certain clinics that they do throughout the year. So if there was a 2 or 3 day period where we needed the court back for tennis usage, it's a pretty easy conversion for you.
Yes.
And would the Pickleball Association, because I don't know if that exists yet, but the group, would they take responsibility for doing those things?
Yes.
Okay.
What is the longevity of the lines that you use during the trial period?
Depending on the weather.
Okay, so it's different than what you'd be doing?
If it rains, that's gone.
And the chalk that you're wanting to use, proposing to use now is different material?
It's just a,
Like a spray-on type?
no, it's in a snap line. You
Okay,
just add chalk to a chalk box, pull the string out, snap the line.
So it's
the
like
line's
lining
up.
a baseball field, basically. Similar?
It's like
Not as thick, but I
building a
mean-
house.
It's like
It's like
construction.
building-
It's a construction tape.
Yeah, okay.
And
Got
that
it.
line is large enough for you to I mean, that's a really thin line. That's
Correct,
all you
it
need.
is. 1/8 inch thick line. That's it. Not 2 inch, not 1 inch, not 1.5 inches, 1/8 inch.
You're just
line.
using the tape because the painter's tape obviously is much wider, just because that was what they allowed at Matilah.
Correct.
I was under
That
the
was,
impression.
well, it's much easier to
do.
see the edges, see the lines. 1/8 inch thick chalk is very minimal.
Right?
So if it rains, we have to snap the lines again, like Jim had said earlier. Okay, so, and we did that pilot program before the city initially let us use that with tape and chalk. And both came up right away with a little moisture. So those courts could be put up in a day and taken down in a day, and you wouldn't see anything.
And during the trial period, which court were you using? What court number?
Number 6,
And what was your desired hours? If I recall from our last meeting, you really preferred the later evening.
well,
Like
desired hours would be in the morning when senior citizens like to play tennis. So do pickleball players like to play tennis in the morning. In the evenings, when you have working folks getting off at 5 o'clock, just like tennis players, they like to play in the evenings. So if you have lights, and we all know how warm it gets here in town, say, so 105 degrees, it's nicer to go out there at 7:38 and have lights, and you can play. Working folks could then use the courts.
And Court 6 has lights, correct?
Yes.
And based on the scheduling, just to point out to the other commissioners and that I'm seeing, it looks like our scheduling is 6 PM is the pretty consistent time. I think I saw one Tuesday that ends at 7 PM. So realistically, scheduling-wise, it's not a conflict for the later play, which is actually in this time of year desirable as long as there's lights.
Yeah, I mean,
One of the desirable times.
sure.
So I think part of the issue, though, is that you would prefer to keep these temporary courts set up rather than taking them down every day and setting
Absolutely.
them up. And so
Absolutely. I think
kind of
Commissioner Murphy
sharing,
mentioned that.
on a daily basis, sharing the
No, I
use
know,
of the
I'm
court
saying
with the
designated
tennis.
courts, but if they needed, like Court 6 is only scheduled, Lower Libby it's scheduled, I mean, if you didn't use Court 6, is there a court that isn't used?
Well, early in the morning, correct. Late in the evening, correct. Court 6 would be open. But sometimes for our youth programs in that middle of the afternoon time, the 3 to 6 time, depending on the size of the youth program, like our advanced beginner has over 20 kids in that class, and they would need all 4 courts. But it's not,
Well,
that fluctuates too.
I think he
So-
just said, Mr. Kraut just mentioned though that even 7:30. So
Right.
even if you gave an
Sure.
hour buffer between scheduling ending at 6 to go over till 7, that would still, sounds like accommodate an evening play.
So just to remind everybody, from a geography standpoint, which court is 6?
Okay, so the court 6 is closest to the Montgomery, South Montgomery. So
That's
it's
the
the
bottom
furthest one.
So it's a
The
standalone
furthest
court.
court,
It's not the one that's
standalone
next.
court. So it's actually, you can talk about noise.
Right, that was my
It's
question.
actually the court furthest from
It's by the road.
all the other
Right.
courts. It's closest to the road.
Okay.
And so it would be, yeah. Well, it's, well,
Come up.
if you come up
Yeah.
to the mic if you want it, as soon as he's, yes. So it is furthest from the other courts that are down there and closest to the road. That's the proximity of it.
Okay.
So as far as bullet points go, the long term, I agree. You had the same train of thought I did. The long term, we don't really have control over the school district. We don't have control over a park that we don't own. So that's something we have to look into. The short term is whether or not we can use Libby and whether or not tennis is cool with that and whether we're cool with that, regarding temporary lines of some sort. The trial period was the trial period, whether or not it came up and left any lasting marks, I don't know. I don't have a dog in this race. I don't play tennis. I don't play pickleball. So I'm sympathetic to both sides. But yeah, I mean, temporary use, got to find something, something more than what they have. Did I hit all those bullet points?
I disagree a little bit about our, the collaborativeness that we have with the other agencies. I think that even though we don't necessarily control, I think that we have a opportunity to collaborate with them.
We do. But we
and
don't
so,
have a full
no.
say is what I'm getting at.
No, but I think that there's probably a lot of room for negotiations, and we can certainly
I think we have an opportunity.
facilitate those
Yeah.
to help.
I agree with you, and I think we have an opportunity, because we haven't approached them in an organized fashion with these kinds of, trying to work this out. So we haven't, I think it's an opportunity to try and work to move
It's an opportunity and
forward.
it's gonna take some time.
Yeah,
which is
and
why
I-
it's a long term.
Right, as a long-term solution.
I feel that it would be, I don't know, I just feel very strongly that if Tim and someone from the tennis community and maybe somebody else from the town would get together first before we make a decision on the temporary courts. I mean, I just feel this is kind of jumping ahead, and it's not really, something that we can look at as, okay, this is temporary. Temporary scares me. Just the name itself scares me. And then work towards getting, during that time period, work towards getting a permanent place. Because that's all going to take time. And it's also going to take research and money. So I just feel we're much too quick to jump ahead, especially after hearing last week at the meeting that we had, and then again tonight, we heard it again. Libby Park is a special place. There's no question. It is a special place, and I frankly feel because of 119 years, we're here, and it should be preserved for tennis.
Could I clarify one point? And
Yep.
apologies for interrupting.
Sure.
You announce yourself and who you are.
Yes,
Thank you.
my name is James Vega, and I work here in the city manager's office. I wanted to add one point. The meeting, obviously, as you mentioned, the council meeting was last week. I guess it's been a busy week. And so the minutes have not been made readily available to the public, but I have the draft minutes. And so I just wanted to note that the recommendation from that council forwarded was a request to the Parks and Recreation Commission to make a recommendation regarding preferred pickleball options at its May meeting. And the reason I wanted to mention that is I do think that, not to speak for the council, I do think there is a sense of urgency of trying to come up with a recommendation. And I think some of the points you've hit on, a short-term and a long-term solution are good, but I just, like I said, I know that these minutes are not publicly available, so when it came up earlier, what did council actually request, I wanted to answer that question for you.
Thank you. And that's exactly what I think we need to come back to. They are looking for a recommendation.
I completely agree. I just want to piggyback on something that Margaret said, and I love you to pieces. But as an ex-history teacher, we can't find ourselves prisoner to history. Just because something's been a certain way for 100 years doesn't mean it has to stay that way.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a strong believer of that, or else we'd be back in the Stone Age, for that matter. So there are options out there. I think, to Jim's point, that we need to supply the council with some viable options. I don't think a decision was going to be reached tonight. I don't think that was the point of what tonight was. It was just to supply them with 3 or 4 options, and then they get to make the decision on where to go from here. We're not a decision-making body. We're an advisory body.
Did you have any more questions of me?
No, I think we're good. Thank you, Tim.
Thanks, Tim.
We have a speaker. Oh, to fill out a card.
Hi, my name is Yoko McSweeney, and I am not very good at speaking, so hope you all understand me. I am a tennis player, and I also play pickleball. We live right next to Libby Park, Lower Libby Park. We can literally hear tennis playing in the evening, tennis ball. And I play pickleball. I know how loud it is. Libby Park is so close to the houses right on the street. And then if, any temporary or any pickleball court set up like upper or lower, that will be such a distraction for the peace we have living in Ojai. We live in Ojai because it's quiet, people respectful, and please do have a consideration for people who live around there. I mean, we can, in the evening, I can see the light. Light doesn't bother me, bother me and my husband. Noise sometimes do, and that's just a tennis ball. And I'm a tennis player, and, and this park is absolutely beautiful and has history, and I totally agree with Mike, Mark, and Caroline, what they said. And I would love to see pickleball court, but the Libby Park is not the place for the temporary or permanent pickleball, court place. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So,
I have a question about the condition of the city property here that had a prior tennis court on it. I haven't had a chance to look at that. What is the condition of that from a staff's perspective?
It would completely need to be resurfaced. It is not in playable condition, and it has no lights. But it is the size of a full tennis court, and you could, if it was, resurfaced and redone and made nice and fencing around it, you could make
It's a
pickleball.
viable-
It's a
yeah,
viable
absolutely.
option, but
And what
not
is the
right
space
now. It
used
isn't.
for now? It's just sitting there?
It's dormant. It's not
pad.
used for anything.
It's a rectangle.
yes.
It's about as
Yeah.
close as it
But
gets.
it's a viable option for,
Absolutely.
It is.
it sounds like a
is
more
a-
long-term solution, but it's,
Correct.
it is, it's
Yeah.
there and we are in control of it.
Well,
Absolutely.
one of the things, not to be a stick in the mud about that location, is there's not a whole lot of parking for it. You'd have to walk to it. You'd have to park at the Lower Libby parking lot. It's not a long walk. You'd park at the Lower Libby parking lot and then walk up Montgomery to Ventura Road. It wouldn't be a long walk.
I
Yeah, there's not a whole lot of street
think
parking there.
that,
But
I don't know
anyway,
what
there's
it
not a
is.
lot of parking.
we have another speaker who'd like to be recognized. Councilmember Haney?
I just have a point of order. If we're going to be taking public comment, you need to open up the public comment.
Thank you.
Okay, that's
Okay.
important, all right? So I suggest you do that. Second of all, you're to provide us with a recommendation. I don't think I'd get buried too deep into what that recommendation is, but you need to do something, you need to send it back to us so that we can deliberate, and we in turn can send it either back to you or back to another body, or do something ourselves, okay?
Thank you.
Okay, so I have one more card. Do you want to open and have one more comment and then close it again? Okay. Howard Radding? So we're opening public comment.
Howard. That's you.
I'm coming up. Hello, members of the board. My name is Howard Radding. I'd like to just go over a few points, if I could, with the Parks and Recreation. Because if we're going to be making decisions based upon
Can you speak into the microphone, please?
They won't be able to hear you.
Sorry, I think it's important that we understand what recreation we're actually speaking about. Because there's confusion around town between a variety of these sports. So what I did today is I brought them. Excuse me a moment. Okay. We're all familiar with tennis. Most people are. It's been around a long time, and what I want to talk about is the noise impact. And this is what tennis does. Obviously, if we hit it harder and you put a couple people or four that can really play, there'll be a louder sound. We have to keep in mind the size of the court and the fact that the ball has to travel a fairly long distance in order to have another sound. The next sport that's available in Ojai, and it's out at Soul Park, is called paddle tennis. This is a paddle tennis paddle. It is not a pickleball paddle. Philippe Gosh, who's an ex-tennis pro, Larry and Heidi Rhodes, and the generosity of a local resident, Mark Rubenstein, they petitioned the county. They converted the 2 defunct tennis courts at Soul Park to paddle tennis. And they resurfaced, a lot of fundraising, a lot of hard work through tournaments. So with that, if you're to play paddle tennis, and it's a smaller court, it's similar in size to pickleball, you take a tennis ball, you have a hypodermic needle. Lucky I'm a dentist, so I'm popular out there. And you let the air out of the ball. And then you play paddle tennis. Paddle tennis is loud. You can hit this ball probably 100 miles an hour. You're very close together. You get 4 people doing that. This gets louder and louder. With that, Philippe and the people that spearheaded were very careful in not putting that too close to tennis, because it would be unacceptable. So those sports, although similar, are not compatible. This is pickleball. Okay, so with that, you put 4 courts or 3 courts on a tennis court, potentially 12 to 16 people in close proximity. You can begin to understand the noise and the impact. And basically, it'll ruin tennis. So that's number 1. Excuse me if you don't mind. Number 2, there's talk of mixed use and putting more lines, etc. After we had the paddle tennis courts come, about 4 years later, lines mysteriously out of chalk and tape started showing up on our paddle tennis courts. That was pickleball looking for a place to play. So they taped, they chalked. Chalk is water-based, paint's water-based. No matter what, ultimately, you can't get the chalk off the court. So now our courts are inundated with chalk. Later, they did petition the county. They were allowed in a space that we were going to put some bleachers for tournaments to turn that into a dedicated pickleball court, and that's what they did. I assume their objection is the fact that you can't be at Soul Park after dusk, so they can't play at night. It's difficult to play paddle tennis next to pickleball because of the noise. But because we're out there so infrequently, and some people transition back and forth, we tend to get along out there, but it really isn't the best scenario for the paddle tennis players. The other problem with chalk and mixed use or taping lines, they put painter's tape down, because I spoke with the county. We have a sign out there. In order to try to get along, you can use removable painter's tape only. With that, they leave it on so long, the court fades differently. By the time it comes off or peels off, it's a different color.
Your time is up, I'm sorry. Thank you.
I have 45 seconds. Or am I going over?
Yeah, it's
You're over.
Could I go 2 more minutes?
When it's red, it's
Okay, if I
We
could go.
started late as well.
red means.
I
red
apologize.
means
If you
stop,
don't mind,
Mr.
I think
Adams.
this is very important. In 3 minutes, we're making a big decision here in Ojai.
Fair enough, but we
And I'd
gave
like to be
everyone else
heard.
3 minutes.
Okay, thank you,
So
I
The 3
understand.
minutes is up.
And we're actually not
Thank
making
you.
a decision tonight.
Well, we're considering things.
We are.
Exactly. So if I could make 3 quick points, I'll sit
You
down.
know, I would appreciate if we were done, because I didn't let everyone else go over their time, and I would feel bad about that. I'm going to equally apply this to everyone. Thank you.
Okay, we'll hand this
I
to
appreciate
somebody
it.
else. They can read my notes.
Well, I'm actually now going to close the public hearing, because we reopened it for your comments. It was actually earlier. And we had commissioners ask him specific questions that they wanted some clarification on. But we did reopen it when we had another card. Okay, so now we're back to discussion. That public hearing is closed. We are looking for a recommendation. I think the long term, I would like to see us, we have historically had on our commission a facilities committee that isn't working right now. I think we should put back together the facilities committee, or it's not commission, committee. And I think we should work with that committee again to get this started on looking at long-term solutions. And I think we have quite a few things that we could put a list together tonight, that things we recommend looking at, and that we recommend doing it with a committee through here that we could then include other people in.
So what is the recommendation we're going to send to the council?
Well, we have to come up with that. I think we've discussed the temporary use, and I think then the next piece of the recommendation is how we'll solve the long-term problem, and how we'd like to approach that. I'm suggesting maybe we approach it by reactivating our facilities committee that have worked on the playground, a couple of other things when there have been active items to work on, and then pull together some regular meetings to start the discussions on that.
And I would suggest that we try to form, and I don't know what the right term is, I'm not great at this political stuff, ad hoc or whatever it is, a committee of all the various groups. And have them working together to try to come up, number one, with temporary court usage, because I think that's going to be important. And I understand the noise thing is an issue, for sure. And that's where the temporary part comes in. I think we're all going to have to bend a little bit in order to come up with a more permanent solution. I mean, part of me says, if you live near a park, you should expect it to be noisy. But the other part is, we need to the permanent solution is to find a separate location that tries to cover all these particular either pluses and minuses.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's the goal of this commission, is to help with that. That being said, there still needs to be some court availability for the people to play pickleball.
I also feel, though, that like one of our council members said earlier, we do not have to get the recommendation tonight. We can listen to
No,
what.
I think he actually was asking
not
if
what
we
he
did
said.
make
He
a
was asking
recommendation
that
tonight.
we do
That
make
was
one.
specifically
That was
direction.
Yeah.
Council Haney, but not the other gentleman, was it?
Yeah, both Commissioner Comerford.
That was the direction
I
from
would,
council.
it would be that they want a recommendation this evening. And, we'll make a recommendation, and it doesn't mean there'll be unanimous potential. So you can, obviously, you have the option of continuing this discussion or making a recommendation.
And perhaps the recommendation could be as simple as, let's form a committee, whether it includes somebody from each group there, along with somebody from the Parks and Recreation Commission. I would certainly be interested in doing that, if that works. To explore a short-term solution, and then also we can continue to discuss, along with them, a longer-term solution. But I think that's as simple as the recommendation
Well,
needs to be.
I think what they're looking for is not, I think they're looking for a recommendation. I feel like we should be making a recommendation for temporary use, and then flesh out how to make that happen. And we know that there are some hurdles and things that we need to work through, but my idea is that we should recommend that there is one court temporarily made available for pickleball, and that we form that committee to work that out, as well as look at long-term solutions for pickleball, for which we have this court, Sewell Park, school district, Chaparral. I mean, there's a variety of things that we can actionably get working on to start doing the work to investigate those opportunities and what we can put together. But I think the recommendation, from my perspective, is, I think we need to recommend what we're looking to have happen, and from my perspective, we're looking to have a temporary situation in place.
I think we need to address the integrity of the courts. And the last speaker, I had some questions that, if you wouldn't mind addressing. You made some reference about the chalk not truly not going away.
It truly doesn't go away. The tape truly doesn't go away. The other issue is safety. When you have multiple lines on a court, it's very confusing, and you have a serious safety issue out there. And the final point I will make is that we need to really respect the past. And the court that you're asking for, if you look at the bench that's sitting there, that was donated by Jack and Ruby Morrison. Do you know who they were?
I do
you know
not.
who they were? Do you in this room know who Jack and Ruby Morrison
I do.
were? Okay, good. Then we need to speak up for them because they're no longer here. And she came into my office for over 20 years and always spoke about how they love giving, they love the tournament, and they love providing tennis at Libby Park for the youth in Ojai. And we need to respect their will and their estate.
Do you have any questions?
I do have another question. So I think that one of our concerns needs to be the integrity of the courts.
Absolutely.
I think that we've identified that. And I think that as council may direct us to give a recommendation, I'm not necessarily sure that the recommendation needs to be for temporary use. I think that a recommendation can be in the form of further research on staff's part. And somewhat disappointed that city staff isn't here to help guide us on some cost issues, some issues of maintenance to confirm what's been spent, how the cost has been shared. But above all, I think the integrity of those courts has to be our top priority. And if shared use compromises that, that's a problem. It's a huge problem.
You can include whatever you'd like in your recommendation.
I'm just saying I don't want to get lost in making a temporary recommendation as a commission if the temporary recommendation includes doing something, even though it's designated as temporary, when there possibly are long-term effects, which is exactly what we said we wouldn't do.
Right.
Please go to Stowe Park and look at the paddle tennis courts out there and look at the chalk and look at the tape.
And I think that's a valid point. If the chalk isn't truly something that goes away with a wash, and there is, and if we use, a different method like tape and that fades, that's a problem that we need to take longer time to actually
If you want to include that in your recommendation,
Right.
all the terms that you're speaking of, that
So-
it doesn't create any permanent, long-term damage to the courts, that could be part of your recommendation.
And
And the safety issue.
I think that noise, I'm hearing, we can only, and the council is the same way, they can only do what the public is willing to tolerate. So if noise is an issue at 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, however late they're planning on playing, we have to take that into consideration.
See, all those
Proximity
should
of the courts.
Yeah, as Commissioner Murphy pointed out, we do picnic rentals at Sarasota Park. People come out and they have parties and they play. They can't play music after 8 p.m.
8
but
o'clock,
they're
okay.
still out there interacting, talking.
Softball, you have
There is
softball
some
till
noise. We
10,
have
right?
softball program that goes
Soccer.
till 10 p.m. There's
Frisbee.
drop-in soccer. There's ultimate frisbee. So to Commissioner Murphy's point, when you're in a park, there's going to be noise.
Expectation.
You're at a skate park, there's going to be noise. It's the nature of a park.
Were you wanting to speak, Commissioner Ferguson?
Thank you. So a couple things. One was a question from kind of the staff perspective when we had this trial period.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any lasting markings on the court from that trial period?
Not that I personally recognize from from my layman's observations of the court.
Any complaints
And
from
none-
the Pac-12
and none
that just
from
happened?
the tennis players down there in community saying, "Hey, your trial period damaged court 6."
Right.
But
okay.
during the trial period, was it a different kind of chalk?
I
I
don't-
sense that it was more of a looser type that you would use to mark a field.
I don't know if it was snap chalk that they used or
There's temporary chalk.
if you
and permanent-
if you
Sorry. There's two different types of chalk that you can put in these chalk line
Mm-hmm.
containers. There's the kind that doesn't really come off very well. I mean, you'd really have to spend some time. And the stuff that we use, though, like Tim had said, it rains, it's gone. And you could see for yourself, we could demonstrate a whole weekend of chalk demonstration.
So that was my first point.
And they used it
second
for
point,
how long? How long was the temporary, just for the
It was
public?
from November through March. They didn't get a lot of time in November because it rained a lot.
Right. And so from November to
Which is nice.
March, no real lasting evidence that there were temporary chalk lines on the number 6.
I would say that would be a fair statement.
So the other, I think, broader point is that this is a public space. I think as a commission serving the city council, we're supposed to make recommendations on the best use of public space. And I think we should respect the private monies that have gone into supporting it, but at the same time, a public space can't be co-opted by private entities because of money they spend on it. So I'm very sensitive to that. I think part of our mission is to serve the entire community, and we're hearing from a section of the community that doesn't play tennis, physically can't in some cases. We are trying to serve older members of the community more, and this seems like a really good opportunity to do that.
And maybe the recommendation can be phrased to barring no permanent damage, right? The commission recommends whatever.
So
right?
what you're looking for is, we need to quantify what temporary is.
Correct.
On all factors.
Yeah.
Not only length of use, but actual use.
I think that I would agree with that, but I also think that temporary is temporary. Temporary isn't 10 years. So if we had this trial period already from November to March, relatively short amount of time, and not a lot of chalk going down on a temporary basis, I think that our recommendation to find them a more suitable, permanent location needs to, that temporary truly is temporary.
Yes.
And not,
Again, yeah, you can put whatever you'd like in your
I think our
recommendation.
recommendation tonight needs to be twofold. As much as I think that that's going to be very difficult to come up with what that second long-term solution is, whether it's being collaborative with the county, and that does seem like an ideal space out there. We have a committee that is set up. We have an agenda item later to possibly combine the two committees that would basically meet that objective to collaborate with the county, and that I think needs to be
Right.
on the forefront of what we're doing, and truly with the council's support, I think that using a facility or possibly taking over a county facility that they've already identified they really don't want anymore, and identify the costs associated with that and the benefits that would come along, pickleball being one of them. It's a huge, huge park. I realize it's east of the city and it's out of the way, but so is Lake Casitas. We've got two huge places on each side of our city that are widely used both for recreation for a reason, So I think that needs to be considered when we're making our recommendation. I think it's a really viable property.
I think it's the work that needs to be done. I think you're identifying all the things that we need to move forward and do in committee.
Well, I think a lot of it is at staff level. That seems to be where there is
Absolutely.
a little disconnect. It's not
agree with you there.
necessarily this committee's work, but working with the county is a staff issue.
Yep.
And not necessarily Sophocles,
Well,
but I'm saying in
whoever-
general,
whoever the
collaborating,
staff is.
right, on a staff level.
But I think that directing that work and coming up with the priorities that we want to look at, identifying all of the sites, identifying what we need to do to see how viable those options are, and identifying the costs associated with each of those. I think that's the work that we can start
Well,
at
I
that
think
committee
the
level.
council has to direct us to do that.
But that's what we're recommending. that
As a
we-
recommendation,
As a recommendation, we're recommending that we put that committee together and
Right.
start that work, as well as recommending that we temporarily allow.
And I think within the recommendation, the end game of this has to be that
A permanent home.
the history and the legacy of the tennis courts at Libby Park are preserved. So it's going to end up exactly where it is now,
Yeah.
which is a tennis facility. But in the interim, there may be a short time where we're in effect leasing a court or borrowing a court or doing whatever, however you want to phrase that, for a short term. And I don't know if we can put a term on it, a year, or 6 months, whatever it is. I don't know if we can do that because we don't know how long it's going to take to get anything accomplished. But that's where we all need to try to work together, I think, to come up with a plan. to make this work.
So is anybody ready to make a recommendation? Are we in a place ready to do
Well, I
that?
have no idea how to phrase it, so I'll leave that to smarter people than me.
It's going to be a long one.
No.
Well, we can collaborate on a recommendation, I suppose. I think that I would recommend that the Libby Park historic value at a minimum be on the forefront of the council's consideration to ensure that no damage is caused to the courts. Further, that the use of the courts, specifically, I believe we're talking about court number 6, be used on a temporary basis. And that council direct either staff or an ad hoc committee to discuss a long-term solution, possibly with the county of Ventura.
And I think in there somewhere it has to be that court 6 can be converted back to a tennis court when deemed necessary by the action committee.
How could we put in there that court 6 could be used on a temporary basis to be managed by staff?
Through staff.
Through
Mhm.
staff to accommodate.
Yeah.
The
To-
other thing that
to-
was not
oh.
addressed is the noise again. For the
So-
people that live
Sorry,
in
on,
the
on the point of the wording of
Or that
this,
we're gonna-
we'll get to this, but just on that word accommodate, I think it has to be more specific.
Yeah, you're
because
right.
we want to accommodate tournaments, things like that, but I don't think we want, well, what else we want to accommodate is a question, because we don't
you're
want
right.
the courts being taken down every day.
Right.
But we do want them being taken down.
Reasonable.
As
For
scheduled,
events.
as scheduled through the recreation department.
So
Everything is scheduled, I think the tournaments and such go through you, do they not?
Yeah, well, the tennis tournament goes through Public Works
Right.
because they use the courts and Libby, all of Libby Park. So that,
But the clinics,
rest
the
of
family
it,
tournament,
all the rest
the
of it
kids
goes.
program, all that, the rest
Well,
of
we
that
know
goes
when
through
the
you, right?
tennis
Yes.
tournament's going to be. I mean, we
Yes.
have those dates. So the
The last
club
weekend
has
in
already
April.
identified that they have they are well aware of the tennis tournament, and
Right.
they have no intention of being down there. You know, they understand.
time.
Yeah, during that time.
And that would need to be converted probably for the entire month of April.
For pre.
There's a lot
for
of, there's a
pre.
lot of pre-preparation.
There's a lot of
Yeah.
prep work that goes
Absolutely.
on. Yeah,
Yeah, it's at least, yeah.
At
a
least for
month
that.
in advance.
Yep.
Yeah.
I don't understand why we can't have a time on this, a time limit.
I think we need it. I think we need
do
a
too.
temporary time.
We
do.
absolutely do.
I think the problem is we have no idea how long it'll
I
take to come
know-
up with a
I know
permanent
Commissioner
solution.
Murphy,
Well,
but
we did 6
still.
months before that was the trial.
Yeah,
I think that's fair. I
Fair.
think that
Yeah, I do too.
6 months is a substantial time. It's certainly less labor to chalk things, right? It gives us a sense of urgency to come up with a
Exactly.
more long-term solution if the council approves our, you know,
And maybe
being
that's a good way
involved
to
in
do it,
it.
and we revisit it at the end of 6 months
Yeah.
to see
Not
where
end
we
of
are.
use, just revisiting.
correct.
Yeah, no, I like that. I like that.
Okay.
I think that the next 6 months, I understand that we went through a temporary period and we didn't really get a lot of feedback, as I understand it, from staff,
Right.
public to
Right.
staff and then staff to us.
Yeah.
And so I would encourage the public who is interested in this issue to provide the input that we truly need to come up with a solution here.
I
Because-
have to say, and just sorry to interrupt, but there wasn't a lot of feedback because I think the tennis community at that time knew it was temporary and
Okay.
it was going to go back to Matilaha. So there wasn't a lot of complaining because they realized, oh, well, come November, March, they'll be back at Matilaha. So
And refresh the committee's recollection on why the Matilaha location didn't work
again,
for.
can't play during the day.
Oh, too hot?
Or at night.
No
No,
light.
during school day.
Oh, during school hours,
They can't use the
okay.
course during school hours.
Okay.
And
no lights.
And there's no lights at
Got it.
night.
Okay. Got it.
It's just,
Okay, so recommend park, the recommendation is Libby Park's historic value at the forefront of consideration. Recommend use of Court 6 on a temporary basis as a pickleball court for a period of 6 months to be reviewed.
While we review long-term options?
Well,
That we can further
so a period of
recommend to council?
For 6 months, and
Well, a
then,
more permanent solution is
discuss.
I think it's really unreasonable if council thinks that we're gonna sit here tonight and come
Right.
up with a long-term solution.
Well,
That's
No,
not
we're
even
coming-
really
we're coming up
reasonable.
with
That
a-
is not-
No, I don't think
That is
that's the
not.
goal. The goal is
No.
to start the process of looking for a long-term solution. So the first
that's
part is
not
we're
the-
talking about temporary courts. And then the
But we
next
also
part is
have
to,
also have to involve the staff,
Well, sure.
of course.
Yeah.
And
I
so
mean, we'd be
I mean,
part
we
of-
haven't even
We'd be part of
talked
that.
about that.
We'd be part of that committee, established ad hoc committee.
While
Um,
the Parks and Rec
we
will
also
have it on our
recommend-
agenda.
Someone would be.
go ahead, Ryan.
I was going to recommend switching the first and second parts of the recommendation. So we start with what the actual recommendation is, which
Absolutely.
is
The actionable
temporarily
within,
use a court
Caveat
at
to that,
Libby,
okay.
and then the considerations.
Okay. And then
We also
I
recommend.
also recommend,
Forming a committee
Well, I don't,
with
I think it
staff
should be,
to,
I think it should be this entire committee. I
Okay.
think we all have our respective views of the issue, and pulling one commissioner to sit with staff I'm not sure that that's equitable representation. I think
Okay.
that's why we're a group of 5 to.
But I think the committee needs to include somebody from each of the various groupings.
Can we
From the
do
tennis
that?
association,
We don't
from
have
the
to do that
pickleball
now.
people. Possibly Mark, from the Wild Academy because you've worked with the group before, right, the tennis commission? For fundraising, you had fundraising ideas, I recall from your comments. I mean, if you have the time. I think it's just nice to get people with a lot of experience involved in this process, and I don't think.
How about a resident from Persimmon Hill for the noise? Because it is a concern. You said I didn't sign
You
up
could-
for
move forward with long-term.
I do hear Libby Bowl.
If you
and I
could-
will agree. I
Here, can you come up
Can you go to the
the
microphone so we
Actually,
can hear you?
Thank
I-
you, thank you.
Hold
Let
on,
her
hold
come.
on.
No, no, she was first. She was first.
No, that's okay, just
She
real
was
quick.
first.
Yes.
So that we don't have a Brown Act violation, that's why you need to create a subcommittee.
I was just gonna say that.
To do the work
Because you can't-
outside,
Yeah,
yes.
because you can't meet outside all 6 of you.
Right.
So you need to create an ad hoc committee.
Unless it's agendized, and
Well, she's.
Even then,
we can have more than one meeting, right?
Well, but if you're gonna go out and go do visits and you're gonna do some of this
So,
work, you're not
As long
gonna.
as it's agendized.
I just want to make that
Yeah,
clear.
I agree.
You need to create a committee. I suggest that you utilize what you're all saying,
Mm-hmm.
someone from the public, someone from the tennis. I bring in a neighbor if they'd like to participate. You're not limited.
Stakeholders, all the
And then
stakeholders.
remember what an ad hoc committee does? They're just in search of excellence that comes back to the
To the full
commission
commission.
for deliberation.
It's Christine Bednar, and I'm a resident, and I do have a concern because I don't consider the tennis courts a park. I didn't sign up to live next to a park. I do hear the music from Libby Bowl, and I did know that I was signing up for that. But I do appreciate the quietness of hearing the creek, and I do have a big concern for enjoying my weekends. And I have to admit, I mean, I love anything with a racket, I truly do, but the sound of that, and to think that, I think someone said you can have 4 games going on at the same time, that sounds to me like 16 paddles, and that is the court that's closest to our residents, and so that does concern me. And so I would just like to have that considered. Thank you.
Okay, as I'm listening to all of this.
That should be.
How about we recommend the formation of an ad hoc committee that includes representatives from pickleball, tennis, neighborhood, 2 commissioners, and staff?
Sure.
Yeah, and the purpose of the committee is.
Yes, thank you. To explore long-term solutions for a permanent pickleball facility.
What about short-term?
Right.
As well.
Long-term.
Well, if you,
Yeah, why not?
That's the first part of the recommendation.
Yeah, we have that
Already,
in
yeah.
in the top. We'll reread it here.
To
Staff
explore
to commission.
long-term.
Maybe we might want to say 3 months. Sounds like, you don't think that that's a,
I would
think
go
6 is
longer
good.
than 6.
Yeah,
I think if
okay.
people feel
Gives
comfortable with
it-
6, that's fine.
I think
but-
6
Yeah,
is a
6
good
reasonable.
opportunity to
Yes,
really
6 months is
keep an
good.
eye on the court and see
Yes.
what the effect of the chalk
And then
is
it
or
can
the
always be,
tape is, you know,
no, leave it at
rather than
6.
just getting it secondhand, you know?
Okay, so,
You had
recommend the
one-
use of court 6 on a temporary basis as a pickleball court for a 6-month period. Recommend forming an ad hoc committee that includes representatives from pickleball, tennis, neighborhood, 2 commissioners, and staff to explore long-term pickleball solutions while putting the historic value of Libby Park at the forefront of these considerations.
And it might be.
Integrity, the historical value and the integrity of the courts.
Yep.
And it might be good in there to discuss short-term and long-term solutions.
Okay.
Because we have we want to get in and out of Libby Park theoretically as quickly as possible.
I would agree.
So if we can come up with an alternative quickly
Great.
and get out of there, I think that's, to your point, right, yeah, and I agree with that.
Okay.
I would
Got it.
also,
So, yeah.
I think it's also important for council to understand that we need staff's cooperation as far as costs. You know, we need to have that information.
Well, we have included them on our committee. Do you want more language in there than that?
I just think it would be really helpful for us to
And
know.
staff support
Mhm.
instead of just staff?
Yeah, staff involvement, I think, is
Representation and
important.
support.
Mhm.
How about that? All right. Let's try this again.
Would it be proper to ask right now for anybody that's interested in the audience to
I think we should
No,
finish
this
this.
is
Okay, and then
we-
what about-
if the-
No, I didn't mean as part of
Yeah.
that.
We wouldn't select the ad hoc
Nothing.
tonight.
We're making a
We wouldn't-
recommendation about
if-
what
if
the
the council
composition of it.
approves
Fine with
it,
that.
and they'll come back, and then we'll
Fine with that. Just ask.
solicit the public for input.
Okay.
You mentioned 2 commissioners.
Mhm.
I think that's wrong. I think we should all be included in it.
Well, that's what they're saying, you
it doesn't
can't.
You can't do it.
Can't do that?
Because of Brown Act, you can't do
we're
it
all-
Oh,
outside.
really?
Yeah,
We
you
all have-
only
we
can
all
have
to be
2.
here. It
You
has to be
can't-
during.
This is a working committee.
You're either all here having this discussion or
Well,
only
to be
2
clear, we
people are
can meet as a
outside of
commission
this.
more than once. If we want to have
Yeah.
a special meeting, we
Absolutely.
can
Right. You'd have
agendize
to
it,
have
and we
a
can all be
special
together.
meeting,
It's
yeah.
not, that doesn't violate the Brown Act as long as the proper paperwork is done. But
Right.
to achieve site visits and going out on
It's
short
much
notice, we
easier
can do
to-
it,
yes.
right, with an ad hoc.
With an ad hoc, yeah, it's much easier.
And everything comes back to the commission to discuss. The
Yeah.
committee doesn't make
You won't be-
recommendations to the city council.
Yeah, you wouldn't be completely left out.
You have to make sure of that, Brian.
Okay, so are we?
What do you have?
And
Chairman?
let's be clear, we're not picking an ad hoc tonight. We're making a recommendation for an ad hoc to be
form one.
formed
Yeah.
at council's direction.
Okay. Parks and Recreation Commission recommends use of Court 6 on a temporary basis as a pickleball court for a period of 6 months. We also recommend the formation of an ad hoc committee that includes representatives from pickleball, tennis, neighbors from the neighborhood, 2 commissioners, and staff representation and support to explore long and short-term pickleball solutions. Oh. Wow.
While the
While-
integrity.
Go ahead.
While the integrity, historical value and integrity of the courts are at the forefront of consideration.
While maintaining the integrity, I think is grammatically more correct. While maintaining the history and the integrity of the existing tennis facility.
Did you get that, Soph?
Sure.
Yeah.
I-
You got it.
I'm-
You got it.
I'm-
You gotta
I'm putting
listen to the recording.
I'm putting the time that you've made this recommendation. and
So you
I
can go
will-
back to it?
Yes.
So we have a recommendation now.
Yeah.
Do we have a
My
second?
recommendation.
I'll second that.
Okay.
I think it should
Now,
be
you
read
should-
again.
You can put it up.
It's
for-
recorded.
You should vote
Please
for
read
it now.
again, the entire thing, the way we were going to present it to council.
Okay. The Parks and Recreation Commission recommends to council that Court 6 on a temporary basis is a pickleball court for a period of 6 months. We also recommend the formation of an ad hoc committee that includes representation from pickleball, tennis, the neighborhood, 2 commissioners, and staff representation and support to explore long-term and short-term pickleball solutions. And then, while maintaining the integrity of the courts and Libby Park's history.
So are we not gonna add anything specifically about the tear down or anything?
I think speaks for itself.
I think that's something that staff can work with the pickleball and what they're gonna do.
So
It sounds
we-
like the lines can be very minimal. I think that should be an objective to keep the lines minimal
we
and
ready?
monitor.
But we've got a second. Are we ready to vote?
We already
we
had a
can
second.
discuss the
We-
motion.
Yeah.
The motion is what's been proposed, but we can discuss it.
Further, is there further
until
discussion?
everyone's ready
Okay.
to vote.
And my only caveat on that is whether or not it needs to be included that, that 6 months can be interrupted if there needs to be the use of all the tennis courts for a specific, I don't know how you word that.
So are you providing, is that
I
an
don't- is-
addendum or a?
Well, let me back up for a second. Is there anything
It's in it.
scheduled between now and the end of summer
In the next 6 months?
that would need the use of all 8 courts that you're aware of?
The only thing I can think of, Commissioner Murphy, is with the kids, the high school kids that are in competition that are playing. And that could happen, where they could have a tournament. I mean, this is what I.
Well,
But I don't think
nothing.
they ever use all 8 courts at once.
I don't know.
But I think in fairness, the
don't know.
pickleball representation is always been that they are aware of the issues and are willing to do what needs to be done, given notice, to make them available if the need arises. Is that
So,
correct?
well,
If they come up with a tournament that requires the court.
Yeah.
we have we have a recommendation, we've got a second, and we're discussing it. Is there, are you wanting to add like a friendly amendment to it?
Nope.
Okay.
Did we
Is
get
there
a,
other discussion?
we got a second?
We
from you?
did.
Yep.
Any other discussion? Okay, so I'm gonna call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
You have to get the
Do we
names.
need a
Oh,
roll call
why don't
vote?
we
Go
do
ahead.
why don't we do a roll call?
Okay.
Commissioner Murphy.
Aye.
Commissioner Jacobson.
Aye.
Commissioner Taylor.
Aye.
Chair Entner.
Aye.
Commissioner Firestone.
Aye.
Commissioner Comerford.
Nay.
Okay, so we have
All right.
5 for and 1 against.
I feel we need more time.
So thank you all for coming out. Thank you for all of the input, and thank you for the discussion. Appreciate it.
And is there a point here
So-
where we can ask if anybody wants to volunteer that they can sign up somewhere?
I
Or
think we
don't-
need to form
Maybe
it
the
before we
next-
can
well,
ask for anybody.
Yeah, let's,
Okay.
So it's off to council, and then it'll come back to us.
We have everybody here. That's
Thank
the only
you.
reason I was mentioning that.
Okay, so next on our agenda is the capital improvement plan.
all right.
I feel like we should table that. Time is up. You think? How long is it gonna take? That's good. I just want to be here till 9. That's all.
So
Just those two?
If everyone will pull out the 11 by 17 that they have. Hey, look who's here, Mr. Grant.
Doing?
Perfect timing.
Good.
Thank you.
You've been hanging out outside
Well,
waiting for this moment.
Would you like to give us a public works report before we start? Sure. Thank you.
I'm trying to think. Good evening to you all. If you wait for your crowd to clear or not. But I saw there's a few questions. I don't know if you wanted those addressed. I think there's a question from Commissioner Jacobson about the repair of the Libby Park fountain, right? So.
Oh, yeah.
And just that.
You do watch, or you read.
I think actually I got to give soft credit because he forwarded those to me. All right.
I do pass some information along to
pass it
Mr.
along.
Grant when we have a meeting
Yes.
about what your requests are. It doesn't go unheard.
Thank you.
And we were able to locate the issue. There was some leaks related to higher pressure. There seems to be pushing a leak open. So we're able to regulate the pressure related to the sand filter. So we put a pressure regulator in there, and it seems to have stopped the leaking.
Oh, good.
So
Great.
we're in good shape on that. The fountain is fixed. There was also a question about the CIP. I guess that was coming up. And then also a cost estimate to add lights to the tennis courts. And I think that might have, are you talking about the futsal courts? Is that what that
Yeah,
was
the
about?
multi-sport
Yes,
courts.
multi-sport.
I see.
Yeah, if we were going to,
They're not tennis courts. Let's
Right.
be clear.
the multi-sport courts, if we were going to add lights to those, what would the approximate cost be?
Right. And I think off the
additional.
cuff, approximately was kind of in the $80,000 range.
For lights.
Okay.
for lights.
Yeah, because
Conduits and lights, everything?
Yeah.
Yeah, all at one time, if we
Okay.
do it at one time.
Yeah,
And
I
I
think-
had some more information about that as part of the CIP as well.
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Grant, but yeah, in one of the tennis community, one of the tennis OVTC members said about in that range, but a little less, about 25,000 per court. They estimated, so.
Yeah. All right, so 25 per court. So we do
50,000,
two courts,
50, 60,000.
Yep, and it all depends if you do LED. And I know we were talking about neighbors being very close by to try to very carefully have any bleed.
I would hope we do
over from the lights.
LED. I can't imagine doing anything else at this point.
Right, yeah, for efficiency
Yeah.
and also it's a sharper cut.
It has such good lines, you really can keep the bleed. I mean, as far as neighbors go, they're gonna want LEDs.
And they're close,
Yeah.
so that'd be ideal, yeah.
The city doesn't require, a lot of cities require LEDs for street lights and park lighting and any new installations. The city of Ojai doesn't require that.
There's no requirement like that now, yeah. I think we're trying to be as green as we can as far as greenhouse gas footprint and so on, so that's part of that goal as far as energy consumption as well. So, yeah, we'd like to get there, and I think that was the goal. I think there's been two National Baseball League that have gone to LED lights, right?
Oh,
But I think there was just
I don't know.
some little comment circulating. I'm not a big baseball fan, but just the other night, I guess it was one of the fields that had the LED, and they really popped the ball. And when it goes above the lights, it cuts off. So he lost track of it. Everybody's watching the game, and it landed right by a hot shot outfielder, and he missed it.
And I know as on our previous discussions of the fields at Sarzotti, it would be very problematic to do LED because we would have to have them in the middle of the field.
Yeah,
And so with our
that's right.
current use, we would be, it makes more sense to do what we're doing now than to move to
The perimeter.
LEDs because we can't light that same area without interrupting the field. And then, we use that field so many different ways.
Yeah, more posts and bigger heads.
Yeah.
But LED keeps improving all the time.
Yes.
It's kind of incremental. We're not
Right.
seeing giant increases in efficiency, but it keeps improving all the time.
Yeah, I think that
80,000
concern about the multiple posts, is,
Kinda killed it.
it's less of an issue because over time, the amount of light you can put on a head is more.
So we're not there yet, but
yeah.
someday.
Is the 80,000 for perimeter
I
or
wouldn't assume that.
That's
post?
what I wanted
Yeah.
to know. What is
Well,
the?
and we were talking with that fence in the center that was proposed, that 10-foot fence to separate the two courts, that we could have post in the center, so it would kick them both ways.
And
as
you're
well.
talking about futsal.
Yes.
The multi-sport futsal.
Not,
goes,
not, not
the big
posts
fields.
in the outfield
Yeah.
area, okay. So that would be, so you're saying that 80,000 includes putting a set of lights on the south side of because the courts are going east and west?
Right. Well, it would, actually, we're talking.
Or just the middle?
We're talking about trying to go high enough so primarily for basketball that they can lob a long court pass, I
Throw
guess
a
you
long
call it,
pass or-
a high
Without it
pass.
going on the next
And
court.
we were just talking, it's probably ideal to have it up around 25 foot or so,
Yeah, I can't
But just
imagine
one down the
anything
middle.
in the basketball happening above 20 feet.
above 20.
Can't
So if you
imagine
got it 25, you're probably in good
If you're
shape.
throwing it that high up in the air, you got issues.
Yeah.
For basketball.
Right.
You wouldn't. Yeah, you wouldn't.
No,
need to
20
throw
feet
that
is
hall.
more than enough.
I mean, yeah.
I mean,
20
I know
feet
you
is
want to
plenty.
avoid vandalism too, because some yahoos are throwing it hard, and you don't want to make it easy to nail the lights, right? That's
Yeah.
What is the
well,
height
they
of
could do
the
that
ones there now?
They could do that at any facility, skate park, the current tennis courts. It's not. I don't think that's probably an issue of people wanting to intentionally throw the ball if
So
they
as
want
far
to.
as
What are the heights there now?
For the ball field lights,
Mm-hmm.
they vary. I think the highest ones are up at 70 or so.
Tall.
There's some
Yeah.
really high ones. We have to get a special lift to go up and change the lights out too.
Wow.
That we don't even have.
Yeah.
So we have a 65-foot bucket truck, and it won't make it. Yeah. So
We could just put a ladder in the bucket truck and
So if,
I saw that on YouTube.
OSHA approved.
OSHA approved. OSHA,
so if we're
that's right.
plugging a number for lights, the number that you gave us at the 80 is both the divider in the middle and the lights.
And we haven't. We're checking in with Musco to get a more accurate. And maybe that's a good time to pop over. I was talking with a consultant that's got some experience with that Prop 68 grant potential, which is due up in August. And so we're talking internally here to see if we can try to get some assistance on, we were talking about that here as well.
Yes.
And I think that Prop 68 has potential. We're looking at some initial point scoring to see if we rank reasonably well. You've got to have certain triggers for median income for the community, as well as other socioeconomic factors. So if we can do that, and you've got to have a primary rec project, which the futsal is perfect for. That can be the primary project. And then you can do ancillary projects in the area. So if we could do the futsal as the primary, we could do ancillary. Obviously, the lights could be ancillary to it, but there's also good potential. Even the ball field lights could be brought into it. Possibly even we're seeing if we could level the fields. So we're trying to be careful. There's even some point scoring with cost-benefit ratios they come up with. So it all gets pretty complicated, so we're looking for some consultant help that have gone through this, or going through it quite a bit, and help us submit it. And there's even public outreach requirements for that. You've got to do, I think it's 6 public outreach meetings required prior to it. Had to be done between June of last year and the submittal in August. So I think all the outreach on the master plan was prior to June of last year, so I don't think any of that would qualify, right? That was all, I think it was all adopted about a year ago.
Gosh, more than that.
More than
Year and a
that,
half
I
ago,
think,
right?
Yeah.
You're saying the Prop 68 funds would cover a portion of the cost to build the futsal court, the multi-sport?
I'm really just saying if it looks preliminarily we can score pretty well, I'd like to make a push that we get some funding to assist the application package. It's approximately $15,000 if we had this particular consultant I'm talking to, kind of $9,000 for the application package to wire it in, and then $5,000 for the outreach. So if we spent that 14 or so, we could really nail that application package. And
what do you think the return on that is? What are you hoping to?
well, the return would be that 260 futsal double courts with
Okay.
lights, right? You throw in the
Okay.
80, so now you're up to 340.
340, okay.
And then ancillary things like possibly fix the ball field lights while we're at it.
Right.
And
So you could work on the park.
Right.
With the primary project, and
Yeah.
then add in those are the ancillary things you're talking about, not just the lights for the court, and then possibly other
kind of the
field improvements.
I mean, maybe we'd call it the South Sarzati improvement project or something. And we'd lump those in there. Take a look at the restrooms, see if we can do ancillary projects to really upgrade that portion of the park.
And the application is due in August, and when is the award?
The award, I believe, was a 3-month period. I'm not sure about that.
If I'm remembering this correctly, the state provides a tool. You go online and you type in the location, and it tells you if that location is eligible based on these economic factors and demographic factors. From when I checked, Sarzati Park was not eligible. So it might be a quick check just to make sure.
I think there were some others that were not eligible, and I think it's point scoring. The eligibility varies. You get higher points if the certain socioeconomics.
It's worth checking that before
absolutely.
spending money on.
Yeah, that was our initial check we're going through right now.
But if it does check out, it sounds like a no-brainer. I mean, to put the application
Now-
in, if it's possible.
So you're saying 6 public outreach meetings
was
regarding?
5 or 6,
5
yeah.
or 6 regarding the projects? that
Right.
were- Okay. And,
Because part of the scoring was public support in the outreach effort.
okay, and that's not something we could do internally with staff? And my other question is, as we approach the general plan, is there work that we could be doing that's meeting both those goals?
I'm sorry, what part was that?
Well, the general plan is going to be revisited, and the parks element is way out of date. Is there a way that we could be doing 2 things at once with those public outreach meetings?
I don't think there's any way the general plan stuff would occur before August. I
Okay,
think that's,
but could we do work with those outreach meetings that would serve the general plan?
Could, but we'd have to really draw in the planning group and get involved. It seems like it might enlarge the task enough that if we could stay focused on developing a good plan for this, cost estimates, and get a good application package, I agree that maybe we'd drop the assistance from the consultant just to focus on the grant application to nail that and the cost-benefit analysis. And then maybe the outreach effort, we could handle that better
Internally, because
ourselves.
we have historically done that before for various different projects.
Right.
The playground, quite a few different things, so
Right.
it seems
Complete
like we
streets and
have.
ATP and so on, right.
We have some skill sets.
Yeah, it seemed like that part, between the two, the application is nice to have somebody who's dealt with them.
Who's in the trenches.
It's complex, lengthy
Yes.
application package, and it's great if you've got a few weeks to focus on it.
But really, though, we need to work on that immediately, because if that needs to be done before August.
Right.
And you have 5 to 6 meetings, we're already way behind. Okay.
Yeah, I think if we get on it quickly, we're in the middle of budgeting. If we can get that allocated for the support for the application package.
Now I know this is very last minute, and Allison's not here, but we are having our open house, and we were going to put together a survey to ask there. Is there a way that we could do that in a way that we could get enough direction that that could count as one of our public outreach points?
I think so. What was the date again? It's on May?
May 18th.
It's
18th,
very
right?
soon, but if we put it together and package it up, which we were already wanting to do anyway, if we could sit down and get that done, we
Yeah.
could knock off one.
Yeah, we wanted you to have a survey out there and get some
It's a great
public
idea. Can we
feedback.
get that done?
Yeah, I think so. I think
Okay.
we could have basically a concept plan and some text and some costs.
Do you have time? I'll help Allison and I, the 3 of us, could we get together and get it done?
I think so.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
So we'd have that for the open house, and yeah, that would certainly count.
Because we're gonna have a commissioner's table, and we're gonna have information, so we could do a survey, like a short Survey Monkey kind of survey available there, or a paper survey.
Mhm.
And then we also could start the publicity for the project,
Right.
which would be great.
And it's great experience too. You could just get some initial input and
feedback.
concern and try
Mhm.
to tweak the concept.
Okay, it's tight for around here, but we can do it.
Yeah.
Timeline.
Yeah, right. May, June, July. Yeah, you've
May
only got
18th, because we
3.
do not have a lot of time, and you probably don't want to space them out, because you don't want to do 5 in a row. It doesn't look so good.
Sometimes I know we
You're gonna
try to
wanna-
do, a Tuesday night and then next
Thursday
week a
morning.
Thursday
Okay,
night.
so that you're hitting
and do a
different
Saturday
times.
morning,
Okay.
and then because people say they can't make the night, can't do the
All right.
weekend. I wasn't here that
You can
weekend.
really get
so-
3 done in a week.
Right,
Okay.
yeah, you don't want to hammer them all. It was Monday through Friday. We did our
All
Friday.
right.
Yeah, that's not.
Yeah, I'm like,
You could do two
Okay.
in a
The
week.
problem with the survey is Ryan and I were on the same, commissioner's table last year. And it was very, very poorly attended. I mean, hardly anybody came over and to talk. and to-
I know Allison's been working very hard, and there is a hope that there will be more contractors and
Well-
better attendance.
I think also though.
There will be this year.
I would say-
The
Great.
attendance is already up from our instructors. We've already got a lot more response from them to attend. And the MC at that event is going to do everything he can to move people to that commissioner table.
On that note, we had our commissioners table and we were there if people wanted to talk to us, but there wasn't a big need for people to come to talk to us. If we had something specific and we wanted the people there to come to the table, we can
Yeah.
be promoting that.
Maybe we'll put one of our giveaways at your table.
Mhm.
So
The convertible.
Oh, that's.
the convertible, right?
Do the convertible.
Yeah, the
that-
convertible raffle, sure.
And
That's about the only thing.
We had, because the year that we rolled out the master plan, we had pretty good participation and a lot of people at that booth.
Yeah.
So hopefully if we
Yeah,
have some
we
visuals.
again, we have a lot more instructors. We're gonna do a lot more promotion, flyers to the schools to get people to the open house. We have a pretty good captive audience anyway, but I think our fail last year was just not having enough instructors, and we're working harder this year to correct that problem.
Great.
So Sophocles, maybe as part of that, it'd be good to put a bold highlight that, maybe we'll consider, flash around these ideas for a title, but please come and provide input for the the proposed South Sorzati improvements, including futsal courts and
That's a
whatever
good
else we
idea.
might
Yeah, we're gonna
try
put
to
it-
throw in there as we hone that in a little bit,
Yeah, we are gonna put an ad in the OVN, like the week before our open house, so we will add,
Good.
be a
We'll-
good idea
we'll work
to
this up
add
and
that
then
in
get
there.
that
Right, yeah, because for it to count as public outreach,
You have to advertise.
yeah.
We will,
Officially, in the paper.
We need some documentation that,
yeah, we'll put
reached out.
we are putting an ad in the OVN, so
Might even wanna-
we'll let them know that we're gonna be discussing or,
No, we're gonna have to hit it specifically and call
yeah,
out.
that's what I mean.
And you might even
We're
want
gonna
to,
be
the
talking about
futsal project could probably pay for one of the ads too, and that would, because we're potentially going to utilize the futsal funding. I know we'd pull away from it up front, but hopefully it would leverage and be
I
successful.
led you astray by saying futsal, multi-sport court.
Yeah.
All right.
Multi-sport.
Please, I said it once,
Yeah.
and then that's on me. Multi-sport court.
Multi-sport court, MSC. Okay, we got it. All right. So,
Sorry.
yeah. So, yeah, if we do two, though, I mean, it seems to be that way in the paper a lot of times, too. People see
Okay.
that one paper, but
Mhm.
not the next, so.
Okay, so we're really on a deadline then. Because we have so
Right.
little time. We need to do that fast. Okay.
Mhm.
All right, good. I think that's great.
I think that's what you'd asked for at previous meetings, right? That we
Yeah.
look into grant support and see what we could do.
And then the
We're-
other.
We've done some of these in the past, but they really are big efforts. We've been through a few lately too, and
Yeah.
they could just consume months to get them in, and we just don't have the capacity for that. So we really need to look for outside help to have
To do the,
to make sure it's
Right.
quality and
Yeah.
increase our ads.
Okay.
And initial assessment, make sure it makes sense.
Then the other thing that we, as part of the Public Works Director report, is the Libby bathrooms.
Right.
Where
So,
are we?
Libby bathrooms, we didn't get it into the Ojai Civic Association,
Okay.
so that's not in yet. And I know we were almost looking if there was a way through the Prop 68 to fund it and support
that
it,
as
but
well.
it doesn't appear to
Okay.
be. You have to have a major rec component as the focus of the project.
Right.
So we don't have anything over at Libby that we're really thinking of that would propose for that. So it goes back to really trying to work with OCA.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's in a holding pattern at the moment.
It is. I mean,
Okay.
we're working on the Libby restrooms. I mean, the sewer issue. we've been trying to work on that design more with a consultant that was related to it, but not the primary.
Right. Okay, thank you. I just was curious about that. Okay, so back to our master plan from last time to this time, really.
Capital improvement.
Or capital
Sorry.
improvement. It's okay.
Gosh, I'm having a hard
I
time
know
tonight.
you've got master
Gotcha.
plan on your mind.
It's late.
Or Sarasota master.
Who knows what's on my mind at the moment? But I just wanted to come back and see what we've changed, because we've changed the amount of money that we have in for the multi-sport courts, so that shows up in there.
Right.
And that was something that we worked on last time. That makes sense. We added the pickleball courts without a known deadline or without a cost, but it's on our CIP.
I'd really like to know what that cost is to pass on to council so they have some considerations.
And I
for-
think so much of it depends on where and how. I mean, I don't think you
Yeah,
can get a
and-
cost, like, if we could ask for a cost for this court here.
Well, I mean,
but
it'd be a
beyond,
start.
Each project is, each proposed location is gonna have a very different, cost point. But it's on there.
Yeah, my apologies
know
to,
where
my
this court
apologies
is,
to
where
actually
you're
called
talking
two
about.
cities. And I was asking them a bunch of questions. Are your
Uh-huh.
courts lit? Do you have a tennis program that, conflicts and all that?
it sounds like
the
the
one question I
county
didn't ask was about cost.
Well, it sounds like the county
Which
put
was
in
a
a
kind of a
single.
fail,
I
but-
understand it doesn't mean a lot, but there's a starting point, I guess. That's something to.
Is there any consideration to use the multi-sport courts as an extra option to be futsal? I mean, it'd be lit possibly, and it'd be a good quality
For
court.
pickleball, you mean?
Right.
We did actually say that, we talked about that as a possibility, but we weren't sure how, all the different sets of lines were gonna work.
I don't
and-
think it works as a final solution for a facility. It would be another temporary solution, because they're looking for a designated facility. They're not looking for a place where they're gonna drag the
nets.
nets out over and over, and where are you gonna store the nets?
Yeah.
I think it might have, if we had those and nothing else, it might be a possible interim temporary, but it's not a long-term solution.
Yeah, they'd be fighting again, once again, for court space.
Right, 'cause we already
We're
know
the
that we-
basketball players, and now
Yes.
we've got futsal, we got the
yes.
soccer players.
Oh.
When do we?
And they
when
all
do
wanna
we get
play
on?
during roughly the same times,
Well, a question might be, where's the biggest demand? Is the demand bigger for pickleball players, or is the demand bigger for basketball, soccer players?
Well, I think that's a really hard thing to say, because we don't have any capacity. We've always had a need for these courts
Yep.
in all of our programming for the basketball league alone.
Yeah.
We don't have enough practice facilities
Right.
as it is. And we know that there is need, but it isn't a group of people that's gonna be right here, because pickleball is practicing and growing because they found solutions that are helping that. So we know we need it for our programming, and we know that there is no outdoor basketball
We,
court.
we still have occasional soccer players going on the tennis
Tennis
courts.
courts.
We
Yeah.
just recently had to send
Oh,
people off
wow,
to soccer.
really?
I think we're getting ahead of ourselves.
Yeah, we are. We're
on
off task, I'm
CIP.
sorry.
let's go.
Back to the CIP. Any comments, questions, things that we should be discussing from members of the commission? This was a revisit after a couple of tweaks.
So what were the tweaks? Sorry.
That's okay. The change in the amount in the CIP that we're asking for the Sarasota multi-sport court facility. And actually, what we ought to do, I think now, is add another line item for the lights.
It's
Yeah.
already here, it says unknown.
Yeah, and do you want it in that fiscal
Right.
year? Is 1920 reasonable, Mr. Grant? For that 80,000 to
Well-
go in fiscal year 1920?
I think as we discussed before, I mean, there's, I guess, lines up to be a couple of how much contribution would possibly the Ohio Civic Association contribute, as well as the Prop 68. If we're successful with that, it might cover the whole thing. But certainly, no matter what, we're talking about having conduits placed so that we could easily install them, right? It's all the,
Right.
it'd be a minor increment to do that.
We've
Well-
always wanted to do that as part of the main project,
Right.
is always have it subbed out and ready to go for when we have the funding for the lights.
Basically, what was done at the skate park, right? Same
And so, and I also think we need to pull apart that number of the 80,000, because we're gonna have a divider in the middle of whether we have lights or not. Right, that was always part of the
But
plan.
wouldn't that be part of the court
Court cost.
construction?
Yeah, because that was called out in the plan,
Right, to stub it, you're saying, right?
No.
With the
to have it-
fencing?
The fence,
in the middle.
yeah.
Yeah, so that shouldn't be in the lighting cost, that's already in the project cost.
Right.
So the project cost for the lights sounds like it should be 50 to 60.
That'd
Right.
be my guess, yeah.
It's somewhere, I'll go 60 to 90, I don't know where it's, we didn't get a very accurate estimate, it depends
How
on.
about, could we use 60 for now as a placeholder, and we can do some more research? But the part I'm trying to hit on is when I heard the 80, I also heard you saying that that was part of you were building the fence in the middle, was part of that 80,000.
I really meant that we expected to place poles and light poles down that center line, down that fence line.
Okay, so that fence is already there as part of the original project and the whatever's going in there.
Yes.
Okay, so that isn't part of the 80,000. So you're saying 80,000 is the cost for lights and poles?
Right.
Okay.
And it's on the high side. It's the efficient LED lighting, and but it depends on factors like how we really do one of the light studies to find out how high and how good appropriate spread is, and not to have
Right,
bleed over
but
to
I
the
would
neighbors.
think that this is much simpler than the skate park. You have no depth, it's a flat surface, and you have a fixed area around it. It's not like the skate park. The skate park was very complicated because you had bowls and you had undulating changes in depth. So
The tricky part here is because it's used as a sport as opposed to, well, skateboarding is a sport, but you have to make sure the lighting isn't in players' eyes. It's not gonna conflict with the sport itself. That's
Okay.
the big deal with a basketball court or a soccer court.
But that's a pretty standard application.
It seems like we have a cost estimate,
Yeah,
right?
we'll go with it.
Yeah.
80,000. Okay. We're popping that number in
It's
there.
better to have it up. It seems
Yeah.
like there's always costs. They never go down.
Oh, yes.
They
That's
always
true.
go up.
Okay, so we're
it's better
putting
to
80
start reasonable.
So
Yeah.
we're gonna put 80,000 in the 1920. Yeah? Okay. And then the only other one that we might like to work on more is the pickleball.
A
But-
cost and,
But it's a little early.
It sounds like it would be, well, I don't think it's early. I think that the council's been really specific on
I just mean it's-
cost-wise, if they're gonna be using this as a budget.
Oh.
Sorry about that.
I just mean, I don't know what cost you'd put in there because you
Right.
don't have a location.
Correct.
What you could do is we could
Well,
move it,
I-
instead of having unassigned, we could put a placeholder in a date closer to now, if that would work. I don't think we're gonna be able to put a number in. But we could move it to, if someone's recommending a different year, where would you like to see it?
Well, it sounds to me like the crowd needs to be sooner than later. If the budget's going,
So 2021, maybe?
At the maximum.
yeah, I
Yeah,
think, I just feel it.
Number, how did you do that? 2021,
You just put no, it's not a number, it's a year.
That's the
Year.
question. I was asking a question.
I think you put unknown under 1920 to keep the ball rolling,
Okay,
and then we can
good.
move it if we need to.
I think 1920 is, I think that it's fair for council, if they're gonna use this as a consideration, that.
Good, then let's move that
Well,
to,
One thing also to think about is that we're already putting a large
Exactly.
number in 1920 for the multi-sport courts, and I think that should be our priority. We've been working on
I
that for
agree.
that
years.
hasn't changed for the commission.
So
don't
I would
think.
suggest
21?
2021
That's
for
more reasonable.
pickleball for that reason.
That was my logic. We have been working on this project as part of our master plan that's been fleshed out in a variety of ways, and I think it's still our top priority.
Okay. So move unknown,
To
unassigned
2021.
to 2021, still at unknown,
Yeah,
PRC, under the PRC.
and that will be a highlighted yellow one, because that's ours.
Okay.
And I should try to keep in mind, if the grant looks reasonable, that, I don't know if there's consideration at Sarzati, but it would be the same park. And if there's any way to fit, where do you
Not
squeeze
part of our
another
master
court?
plan.
Yeah, it's not part of the master plan. It'd be nice if we had
But
a
it would
location.
be
We worked
nice-
hard on that master
It's like,
plan.
But at the
I know
same
for the
time.
ATP grant, I mean, we applied and it was difficult. We jammed it in amongst work and we got it. And after we got it, you say, God, I sure wish we had, if we had known we were going to get it, we sure should have rounded up some numbers more than down. So anyways.
Well, play with that. I mean,
But if Prop 68 covers the cost of that 260 plus the lights, there's that, and that money is budgeted, we can certainly ask council to reconsider reallocating those funds for other things in light of needs that come up, like pickleball.
And I think we should all recognize that the capital improvement program has a lot of pressure on it. There's always pressure for paving and all sorts of project. And whenever there's work that has to be done that comes up that wasn't expected throughout the year, like several projects did this year, things it comes from CIP. It always draws down CIP. And even some of the funds that were anticipated didn't come in as strong as hoped. So there'll be a lot of pressure. We're working through that right now.
we're kicking that to council.
That's right. So the wish list is good to go for it.
Yeah.
And I think there's potentially funds come from the state to rec. I haven't heard a final on that. That's hoped
good.
for, right? And that
Yeah.
Yeah,
well, we won't say it out aloud, but this guaranteed amount.
Right.
Yeah, potentially guaranteed.
Your
Yeah, right.
Potentially guaranteed amount.
Potentially guaranteed
Yeah.
portion.
Portion.
And if that comes through, that'd
Every
be
city.
Yes,
terrific. That
exactly.
could really help out the project, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, in the dream world, we'll get that, and we'll get the Prop 68, and it couldn't be better. It'll take care of a lot of work for 5 years. Yeah.
Thank you.
So anything else on the CIP?
I think it looks great.
All
Do you need a
right.
motion for that?
I don't think so. I think we're just
I mean,
discussing it.
yeah, and Mr. Grant, I did send this to you, didn't I? This updated.
Yes, I think you did. Yep,
the
I saw it.
So I'm trying.
Do we,
Thank you.
do we need to move it forward to council? That's more of a separate commission
Keep in mind that, yeah,
recommendation,
for the-
because this is our version.
Well, but it's just a matter of, I guess, maybe the Public Works Director's discretion to
Actually,
add certain items onto the, making a recommendation.
I think
to-
it's
for the-
not, it's not so much, we would recommend, we'd like staff to share this with council.
Right, I think as
Our
part of the
version.
budget, we can say, this is the request from PRC.
Perfect.
And I think that off the cuff, I just know that all Parks Master Plan, 75,000, I know we don't have that kind of money.
No.
And I know, I'm hoping we can create through, potentially, if that looks like a definite income from the state, that hopefully the multi-sport court is going to be a reality. And that would be a substantial, and then we're still trying to hear back from OCA on that other one as well. But that's always been a secondary priority. I mean, the restrooms survive with or without the remodeling, but we're trying to get it done.
Right.
So it seems like that's the priority I'm hearing is multi-sport courts.
Multi-sport.
Yes.
With lights.
With lights.
Yeah, the master plan, I think it'll be hard just because there's so much pressure on that CIP.
I am gonna come back and play on those courts often. My mother-in-law just lives right up the
You
street.
should.
I'm just gonna come play and play and play.
Well, thank you for coming tonight.
Thank
you.
Perfect
Mr.
timing.
Thanks.
Thank you
Yeah.
very
Okay.
much.
All right, so we are on to 8C, which takes on a whole new light, which is the Sewell Park Committee. It's the recommendation to consider combining the Valleywide Parks District Committee and the Sewell Park Committee as a single committee. I think I'm kind of seeing this a little differently, which is maybe we need a facilities committee that's looking at this through the lens of possibilities for where we can address our facilities needs. And that is what we're looking at Sewell Park. And then whoever is on that committee will be looking at pickleball, but other things that we could do there as well at the same time, and have those discussions with staff. And so I don't know that they need to be combined. They have overlap, but I don't know that they're best combined at this point.
Yeah.
I just hate to see people doing the same. I've been up since 4.
I know, you're tired.
I think that they have a lot of similarities, and I just don't want to see people making multiple contacts at getting the same information. That's kind of was my thought process.
Yep.
If we want to, can we combine them with some new, like, objectives and call it a facilities committee?
I have some concerns. I don't really see the overlap. I feel like the Valleywide Parks District Committee, like, is kind of exploration into,
Yes.
like, we need to be informed as a commission as to, like, what would that mean, right? We're not at the point where, like, we have a Valleywide Parks District, and now we're thinking about, like, well, how do we tap into kind of various resources and use it?
So maybe keep them separate, and then I think, to me, from what I'm hearing, there's a huge chunk of land at Sewell Park that the county, from all indications, isn't really fond of managing, and at some point said,
We've gotten different feedback, because actually the most recent feedback is they were not interested in handing it over.
Oh.
Which was a couple years ago,
But
to be
I
fair.
thought they said
So-
at council that they were interested.
So this is like a facilities
A facilities
topic,
question,
right?
yes.
There's a resource.
Well, maybe
And a
instead of
question
calling
of-
it the Sewell Park Committee, it needs to
Exactly.
rename that.
I
Is
don't
that
think
what
we
you're
need
saying?
it, exactly.
Okay.
We create a facilities committee to
Okay.
address our facilities needs, one of which is gonna be tasked with working on that ad hoc committee.
Okay.
Or we
So I
can keep
think
that
then-
separate and have different representation on both.
Can't
we-
this be even simplified more that we ask the council to direct staff to communicate with county to see if they can
Well,
absorb the
but
park?
that's just one issue on the facilities committee. The
I'm not,
facility-
I'm talking about Soul Park, plain and simple.
But I think right now we're trying to decide, for instance, of where would that lie in our committee structure? And I think what we're saying is that Sewell Park shouldn't be its own committee at this point. It would be better to have a facilities committee that's looking at a wider look and will do that work.
And there's no commissioners currently assigned to it is the other issue.
Yeah.
Not at the moment.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
as far as Sewell Park as a facility, I mean, I think we need to have a very concrete idea of what or why or how we would use it before we're at the point of like thinking about negotiating something with the county. Because right now it sounds like it's open space that's expensive to maintain, and we don't have a specific
Afford to either to.
use. So yeah.
In the last discussions, and this is old information, there was an openness to letting us program it and use the facility. There was an openness to those discussions. That was what came back to us after the staff discussions that they had. So that's still worth investigating, programming it.
Right, that's a better deal for us.
Yes.
Well, and maybe something like pickleball could be something like what you do through a programming. I mean, it does, we are serving the public, I understand that, but at the same time, it seems that the recreation, you're the recreation experts in programming, and if there's revenue to be sourced from a particular interest, I think that that's worth.
So do you feel comfortable, though, with forming a facilities committee to look at those questions as the conduit to making those contacts with staff, working with staff to gather that
Make
information?
a seventh committee?
What's that?
And have a seventh committee?
Well, I think that we are, I think we get,
Just suffering from schizophrenia.
naming, I think, is pretty much off.
Can remove that?
We can remove naming, which we're skipping, but they're the same
yeah.
discussion here. But at Sewell Park, I think we're scrapping Sewell Park as a committee.
Yes.
And we're moving it to a productive committee that's gonna work on multiple.
So we're moving to Soul Park and 5? And
Youth committee's gonna is gonna be good. Pool committee could stay as it is, or be also part of a facilities committee. It could go either way on that one. OUSD partnerships, I think could roll into, well, I'm open to discussion on that.
Well, the facilities committee could basically do all of this. I mean, it would deal with the pool, it would deal with Soul Park, it would be kind of an all-encompassing.
Here's how it's happened historically sometimes. We have a facilities committee, it works in facilities committee in a larger group, and then we had the playground committee.
Yeah.
That's how, you start to pull things off. So that's why the pools could go either way. If that wants to be pulled off and two commissioners really want to work hard on that, that's fine to give it that focus. But it's still good to have the facilities committee working on a higher level with a variety of different topics that we're not sure where we're going with them, or gathering information and doing the work. It's been effective historically. We don't have to go back to it. There's lots of ways to do it.
I think it'd be worthwhile to keep the pool committee because we have specific interest in that, and there's a
Yes.
lot of research to do. I think a facilities committee would make sense to kind of look more broadly at some of these questions that pop up, like how could we use Soul Park, and
Or
where
if
could
we have
pickleball
program, yeah,
go,
look at
and-
where could the program, yes, where could pickleball go?
And, if we get to like a point, like say with pickleball, where we have some pretty concrete ideas, then maybe we have a pickleball committee that kind of.
Subcommittee.
Or in this case, we're gonna have an ad hoc committee already.
Right.
So
Right.
if council takes a recommendation and runs with it, we will be forming an ad hoc
We'll
committee.
know that
Yeah.
shortly.
Yeah.
So for now, remove the naming and Soul Park off of our commissioner and
Everyone's
committee
in agreement.
reports? Does that seem fair? I'm just trying to shorten the
Yeah, the
reports
list.
coming through.
But add a facilities or no?
Yeah.
So remove Soul.
Remove
Soul
Soul
Park.
and remove the naming, because we've bumped
Yeah.
those.
Right.
And we
That-
kind of
that's-
did the
that's-
name, we
the
didn't really
naming
have a
is-
naming committee, we
yeah.
did it as
We
a
don't need to.
entire board, so we don't
Yeah,
need
we
to have
don't
a
need to
committee.
Well,
have it
actually,
anymore.
Commissioner Murphy did quite a bit of work on that.
Yeah,
You were the sole committee member.
I was.
So,
And everything's pretty much been presented to the
It's
city and
moved
done.
on,
Right,
yes.
it's moved on. So that can be defunct.
Okay.
so
So now we're on to the part with looking at our commission assignments.
Yes.
So remove naming,
remove Soul, and create
Facilities.
Committee.
Mhm.
And then we're gonna decide right now as to who is gonna
Sure.
be on that committee. Should I say Bueller?
No, I was gonna say, I also.
Bueller.
Thank you, Mr. Hahn. Facility Committee, so.
I'd
Do we have any?
interested.
I'm happy to do it too.
Anyone else interested?
So Intner and Firestone, is that what I heard?
Yep, that's what I heard, and staff, and you'd
And-
like a city staff.
City
Yes,
staff. Mhm.
because I think that this needs to have staff time allocated to do some of the work that isn't within our purview.
Okay,
Those of you who are volunteering realize that pretty much everything can be thrown at you on
Yeah.
Facilities Committee.
Yeah.
I mean, if we just don't want to deal with it, we're just going to throw it to you guys. I'm just being honest.
Yeah, no, I'm okay with that.
That's the idea, is right, this is kind of a, like, kind of
Catch-all.
A catch-all
first
of
level
event
sounding
ideas.
board, and
Yes.
then we get concrete ideas, they go out.
All right,
to
it's
someone
recorded then.
And I don't know that this needs to mirror the ad hoc committee, just to put that out there now. I don't know that our
Oh, for-
membership here, I definitely, I don't think both people from this need to be on that.
else. Right, for the pickleball.
Yeah.
No, I think there should be separate people, actually.
Well, I think one could be good as an overlap, but I don't think you need both, but.
Like I said, I've already put my name out there for that ad hoc. thing,
Good.
Just because I think they have.
Good.
Just leave it with one.
We put two in a recommendation.
Thank you.
We put two in a recommendation, so.
However,
Okay. So we've jumped. So we are done with 8C.
We're on 9.
We're on 9. Recreation staff reports and updates.
Okay.
Last time.
Yeah, last time. Would you mind reaching for those papers
Not
and
at all.
passing them to me, because those have some of my
Your notes.
notes on there. Thank you. So, as always, I'm gonna start with my favorite last, movie night, our parent night movie
Yay.
night. We had over 40 kids at our last movie. And again, it definitely comes with promotion, because when we put flyers out to the schools, then we get
Big night.
more attention. So like, who would have thought that marketing works? So movie night, our next movie night is May 31st. Megamind, for those of you who are animated movie aficionados. I haven't seen that movie, but I'll repeat as I always do. It's a $12 drop-in, and parents can drop their child off from 6 to 9 p.m. The movie starts at 7. We provide pizza, popcorn, and a drink, all for the low price of $12.
and for what it's worth, that movie's based on my autobiography.
Is it? Megamind, yeah.
And what are the age ranges for that?
The age ranges are 5, strictly 5 years of age to 13.
ID required, right?
ID required.
No
yeah,
diapers.
We do check IDs at the door. Our summer guide is out. Hopefully,
very
raise
nice.
your
Yes.
I
hand
got
if
that.
you received yours in the mail.
Yes.
Excellent. So almost everyone. So we're very proud of the guide. We have pickleball actually in there. We included them as one of the community groups to reach out to with their contact information. They actually put an ad in the guide. Our preliminary numbers in our 1 week specialty camps is very strong right now. We
Oh,
have
good.
a lot of enrollment. As a matter of fact, the wilderness program.
Oh, sold out, I
Yeah,
heard.
I'll just say that program in particular, within the first 10 minutes of that of registration opening up for wilderness, it was full within 10 minutes, and there were
Wait, Liz
as many people on the wait list. So
Wow. Are we able to
Very-
add programming or something
it's
like
a
that?
staffing. If we can get the staff, it becomes we're trying to
That's great.
hire more staff so we can add. But there's also transport issues too, that van sharing between day camp and wilderness. A day camp begins on June 17th and runs for 9 weeks. As we talked about in our last Park and Rec Commission meeting, we will have swim lessons again at Villanova High School pool, and those registration numbers are looking good, the preliminary numbers. And because Nordhoff We don't have access to Villanova's pool for public swim in the afternoons. And as you know, Nordhoff's pool is going through reconstruction. So the one small compromise we were able to work out is we will have Saturday public swim at Villanova.
That's really
Pool.
nice.
Yeah, so we
That
we
was very
got what we
accommodating
could.
of them.
Yeah, it was. And so we got what we could get. We took what we could get. So for 4 Saturdays,
Okay.
Saturday, June 29th. We're going to send out a mass email. It's not in our guide, so we're going to send out a mass email to those in our database to let them know June 29th, July 6th, July 13th, and July 20th. The pool will be open for public swim from 12 to 4.
Nice.
This summer. Yeah, cool. So it was the best we could get. And
Yeah.
we had exhausted all
Difficult.
other
Well,
available
I appreciate that
pools in the
Villanova
valley.
was willing to do
Yeah.
that.
So we thank Villanova
Nice.
High School for that,
Yep.
for allowing us to continue to offer swim lessons and use it for public swim. So that's it for updates on classes and programs. The youth commissioner seat, they were, if you want to.
We had interviews, and it will be going to council hopefully this next meeting, but we'll see when it gets on there.
Yeah. But we had 2 candidates, right?
Two
And
wonderful candidates.
2 wonderful.
Yes. So consider ourselves very lucky.
Yeah. So that's it on that. I've been, chomping at the bit. This is going to be a very brief, so on to 9C, revenue and expense report. So last year at this time, revenues were at 402,000. This year we're at 422. So about 20,000 ahead of
5%.
Great.
of last year.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, it is. And so we finished last year, the last fiscal year, we finished at total 580,000. So if all stays the same, we might, we'll finish around 600.
A question about this.
Uh-huh.
Are you going to get to this?
We are.
Okay.
We're almost there. And then expense, the bad news. Last year at this time, we were at 717,000 in expense. Of course, that includes everything, staff, materials. 717,000, and right now we're at 736. So roughly
about the same
20,000.
cost
20,000 ahead in revenue, 20,000 above last year in expense.
So those two numbers are kind of mirroring each other.
Yes, they are.
Okay.
What else? Oh, that's it on revenue and expense. Our 6th annual open house. We hope you will all be available to come on that day.
To
It's
send out a
from,
shift list.
yes.
Okay.
So in Allison's absence, she's she kind of does a lot of the coordination for that event. So that's what she's asked. When the time you're available, we're hoping you can all be there for at least an hour, half of it. So it's 11 to 2. If you could be there for an hour and a half shift, and people share that, you guys share that time.
Day for me, so I
Oh, I know.
Weekends are
I understand that.
So can
As
you-
available, but if you could email her with, yes, I
Times?
can come, this is the time I can come, and then
Do you think she
formulate.
could just send us out a list of shifts that she's looking to fill, and we'll
Sure.
email her back?
Sure.
Because then she can divide it up, and we'll.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll have
And
her.
then she'll have it all collected in
Okay.
one place.
Can you just go over what the open house is, so everybody
Yeah.
that's watching knows?
So, sure. So, on that day, we have a rock climbing wall, we have an obstacle course bounce house and a regular bounce house. It's the end of the 5-a-side soccer program. So we have an outdoor stage. They come during our open house, and they do their 5-a-side awards to their teams that are in the finals. We do a raffle. We have a free pizza lunch. There's instructors, as we talked about. We're going to have a lot more instructors there. We've got our science guy coming to do science experience with the kids. We'll have wilderness out there. Many of the instructors this year, our music instructor will be out there, so we're going to have a lot more hands-on. Legos will be out there to, promote their
And you have
promote their
demonstrations on
summer
the
program.
stage as well?
Demonstrations throughout the day.
And it's free,
Gymnastics
free
is out
community
there.
event.
Everything is free.
Excellent.
And we'll have, like I said, great raffle prizes. So
We're not eligible, are we, for raffle?
Say what?
Yeah.
We're not eligible for raffle, are
The
we?
commissioners are not. It's commissioners and staff are not eligible for the raffle items. And actually, we're hoping to roll out recreation department gift cards.
Oh,
They
that's a
are
great
gonna
idea.
be the.
That's a great idea.
That's a
Yeah,
great idea.
our in-house staff did a great,
Yeah, that's a great idea.
beautiful design on the
Nice.
front of the card. So
Great.
you will hopefully,
for holiday
hopefully,
gifts and
People
other
will be
things
able to
as
buy
well.
a $100
Yeah, love it.
gift card
yes.
to give
And you
towards.
can actually you
them
could you can redeem them online, purchase them online. So
Great
we're
idea.
really
Innovative.
excited about the gift card idea.
Good.
It's great.
Yeah. And again, hopefully you'll see those cards in play at the open house.
Has tennis been asked to the open house? Is there something they could do?
Yeah, tennis will be there.
Okay.
Yeah. Where again, we've made a much stronger push we made a push every year, but this time we were a little more emphatic about the necessity to be at the event.
And I think we discussed that you would rewrite that part of their contract and make it mandatory.
Well,
Is that something that staff's looked into?
no, we haven't looked into that. I'm not sure that, I think it's a discussion for another
It's for the
time
next
about
guy or girl.
adding that into their contract, making that mandatory.
Yeah, I just think
I don't know what the
Yeah.
what the legalities of that are.
I think if somebody wants to promote their program, they would be there.
Right.
Yeah.
If their programs are completely full all the time, they might not be as inclined to be there. But
Well, of course, and it is, yeah, like
think we
you,
can put
I have to work.
a
I
rec-
mean, some of the.
I think it's
some of the
reasonable
ins-
to put a
Some of the
requirement.
independent contractors
So
have
that
to
can be a
work
future
or
agenda item.
they have other things, but
Yeah.
it could be for
Can we
future
make that a
agenda.
future agenda?
You can.
I'd like to discuss that.
You can, sure.
Okay.
Okay,
We already did
Now
10.
we're on to commissioner committee
Yeah,
reports.
I have no, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I have no other information unless you guys have questions. Oh, that's coming on commissioner
That's a
reports.
commissioner
Okay,
report.
thank
It's a
you.
commissioner report, we're almost there.
So
I
Phil,
di- I
go
did
ahead
not
and
know.
start. Yes, with the pools committee.
Oh,
We're starting number 6?
Go
Sure.
for it.
Well, Sophocles, Eric, and myself, we did a wonderful tour, Carpinteria Pool. And we had a wonderful gal who was so generous with her time, and we asked lots of questions and received a lot of answers. Their pool was built in 1989, and the approximate cost was $1 million, operated by the city of Carpinteria. Established a no-cost, which really interested us, 60-year lease with the Carpinteria School District to use the school district properly in 1992. Since the building in 1989, the pool was replastered twice. It's really amazing. This pool is old, but it's in absolutely great condition. Portion of the pool built was founded by a donor wall, $5,000 per tile, and we looked at the tiles, and they're really neat. And,
Some local, too,
yeah.
some Ojai stuff.
Yeah, some of the Ojai, yeah.
how many total tiles were there?
God, I
don't
don't
recall.
know.
I
Look
did,
at the picture.
I did take a picture of it.
we do
I'll
have a
to- I'll
photo
have to
of
blow
it,
it up
yeah.
and count it. I don't know
Yeah.
how many tiles were there.
So the annual cost of recovery was 50 to 60%. Provides 30 hours per year to the Carpinteria School District. The school pays for the lifeguard cost. Swim lessons for 3rd and 6th grade students. The high schoolers use it for practices, meets, water, and water polo games. The high school is charged for pool use and lifeguards.
Can we back up for a second? I'm sorry, did you say 30 hours a year?
30 hours
30
a
hours
year.
per year.
Oh, year.
But that's for that,
That's for the third,
For the
mostly,
that one
mostly for the
specific.
third
Got
through
it.
sixth,
Okay. All right,
sixth
thank
grade
you.
program.
Yeah, it's for the younger ones. Water temperature is set at 80 degrees all year long. So we looked at the plant in the back that, helps with the heat, and Eric was very interested in that. The Dell Zone assists with the sanitation using calcium hypochloride, which I found amazing, which reduces the use of chlorine and hydrochloric acid, higher water quality. The pool operates with 2 full-time city positions and 1 part-time pool tech. Several outside groups rent the pool. Ideal pool setup, MPR storage room, retail space, bike racks, and therapy pool. They do not charge a non-resident fee to use the pool.
They do not, you said?
It says
No?
do not. No, they do not. I remember we were so surprised. Yeah? Okay. March to October is their high use season. The maximum occupancy is 300. So.
You referenced the annual cost recovery. What is the cost of operation per year?
We don't
That-
have
that-
that.
that's
We
still
are-
pending.
We were still
Okay,
I was
pending
just curious.
because,
Yeah,
no, because we were going to get the,
So we reached out to the recreation manager of Carpinteria. We're still waiting.
but
for
we'll
that.
get an answer for
And it would
that.
be interesting to, with that answer, to be sure that, because it says there's 2 full-time employees, it'd be interesting to look at both the operations cost and the staffing cost.
Right.
Just as a follow-up if they give you information.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I think
I-
they will.
Recovering 60% of 1 million or recovering 60% of 200,000 is the
Right.
difference.
Right. So we're waiting for those
Okay,
costs.
good.
What's their revenue?
Right.
What's the expense?
Right. And
That's-
as well as staffing, because sometimes they get separated out.
Yeah, well, I'll make sure
Just-
I had conversation with the recreation manager from Carpinteria, and he said, send me an email with what you want, and I sent him an email with what I wanted, and I'm still
You know how
still
busy.
waiting.
Yes, he's
Yeah.
busy.
He's busy. It's a busy time of year.
like it's-
before-
Also,
busy.
I think it's also critical to remember that $1 million in 1989 is going to translate to
Yeah.
a whole bunch more than that. So their recovery cost of 60% of $1 million has absolutely no bearing on
No.
I think
Yeah.
that's just
He means
recovery of their
monthly.
annual
No, we mean
expenses.
the annual recovery
Annual.
cost of of operation.
Of-
now.
okay,
Of
gotcha.
operation
All right.
now. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So I think a good step, again, would be how much is it going to cost to build a pool? And where? I mean, we don't even have that information yet.
It's going to be right
we're gonna
next to
have
the pickleball court.
Perfect. We could have a floating pickleball court. But I mean,
Well,
Go ahead.
I had a meeting with the mayor and received a lot of information from him regarding the various committees that have gone through the town trying to get the pool. It was really amazing. But what he's going to do is he's going to talk to the county, see about the why, and see about, there's 4 other sources. One of the places that he mentioned, which was amazing, is over at Nordhoff. There's 14 acres there.
The privately owned acres across the street.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's,
And that would be so ideal.
so the issue with that is that it's gone from $4 million to $14 million because that person knows what they've got.
And it's been on and off the market many
Yeah,
times.
and it's zoned for what we would intend it to be used for,
Right.
however, industrial basically, but I don't see the city even being able to bargain with the current owner for either land trade or for purchase price. Apparently, the school district approached them about getting a discount, and the guy was stonewalled.
What about the lease part? I mean, I like that idea.
The
You know, if,
lease?
yeah,
Leasing the property?
yeah.
Well, that's.
what's the benefit to the landowner?
I mean, that might work for say like Ojai Valley Inn. They I think like the winery is leased, that property there.
That's right.
Now,
It is.
that's
Yeah.
a lot of
Term
private
lease.
money going into that.
That is.
Now, for something like a pool, I mean, we'd be dumping a lot of money into something that we wouldn't be able to keep forever, you know?
Yeah. I think it's good that you're investigating and taking meetings, and this is exactly what the committee's meant to do, so thank you.
And I think that the part of the, I think that part of the pool committee kind of overlaps a little on valley-wide
When
Parks
that's
District,
farther
when that's
along.
farther, yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's what I heard at council was that, you know, the city itself can't truly bear the cost for the entire valley. And it's something to consider when we're, you know, looking at property tax and, you know, if it's valley-wide versus city, the cost is shared, obviously,
Yeah,
amongst
we've explored that to
30,000
some-
people.
To some degree, with the possibility of a
Not just necessarily being in Ojai, but, you know, maybe at the Oakview Community Center or other properties, you know, down in not necessarily Ojai
That was
City.
definitely brought up at our meeting too.
And is
Yeah.
partnering with the Ojai School District completely been exhausted? Is that completely off the table?
No,
No,
it is not, because, you know, we have a new
Yep.
person
Because
on
it does
board,
seem
and so
like
we
maybe
need to-
someplace like Chaparral that has some extra space might be, and is centrally
So-
located, but might be something they might
So
consider.
I think, yeah, and I appreciate the work you guys are doing, so
That's great.
keep at it. And I think the report was very helpful, and thank you.
Good job.
Thanks. Thanks for going.
All right. Anything else from anyone else?
I have nothing to report.
Okay.
Are we going to acknowledge?
Well, I didn't know when we were gonna, I thought we would finish. Are we finished with our?
I think Councilman Haney has a presentation, no? Something.
Do you?
I think.
Yes, sir.
you got a lot on
Born ready, sir.
You got a list.
Now
huh?
it's your turn.
You have 3 minutes.
Looks like he has a list.
Lights going on.
I'll hit the
Oh
clock.
my God, it'll be flashing
It's
for
been a
you.
long night.
So what's you know what's first of all, thank you for the debate tonight and the discussion regarding pickleball, and it's exactly what you're here for, and it's exactly what we're supposed to do, is listen to the community, identify what their needs are, and figure out if we can or where we can how to accommodate them. And that's any group, and that's for anything. So we're talking about pools. Pools have been talking about in this community forever. Now we're talking pickleball. There's just, you guys are doing a great job, and and it's difficult, because you're not used to having 30, 40 people here.
It's great.
It's good.
I think it's nice.
I loved it. I loved it. And there's things, point of order, and
Yeah.
when to open and when to close, and when to keep someone quiet, and all the other stuff is so interesting. We deal with the same thing. Now, when I was over there, but when I was over there, we didn't help. Ours was always interactive because there was only 2 people that ever showed up at the most. So, but you guys did a great job tonight. You did exactly what you were supposed to do. And you send something back to council, and then we'll digest it, and then we'll figure out how to listen carefully to what you said and what you recommended, and go from there. So it's a big win. Greg Bergman is a gentleman that I met with about 6 years ago, and he's the deputy director of the county of Ventura, and he oversees the GSA budget, which is about $144 million. But the GSA budget oversees the parks. So he's the guy that I'm going to be calling tomorrow, and I'm going to be setting up a meeting, Bill Wyrick and I, with him to just have a discussion about Soul Park.
Oh,
Great.
good, great.
So
Said
that's
Greg
something.
Bergman?
Would you like to include a commissioner?
I could, Sage, if you'd like to be a part of it, I'd love to. I'm going to call and see if he still does that. I don't know if he's promoted or what, but we'll start there.
Okay.
The second thing is again, you're going to be entrusted to talk about how can we program that facility if it's operating in a negative. So how can we turn that negative into a positive? And it's programming. And programming might be pickleball. Programming might be soccer. Programming might be whatever it is. But there's a lot of turf. There's a equestrian center.
We'll be there on Sunday.
And it's funny, I took people back again 6 years ago when I was on this commission. I took people there and asked them about, what do you think of this facility? The only negative, they said, it wasn't maintained.
Yeah.
That the ground was hard and horses slipped, and if it was prepped properly, it'd be used more often.
Restroom upkeep, things,
So
basic facilities.
So again, those are some things to look at, but we won't know until we start talking.
Mm-hmm.
So we're gonna help. That's what you all said. You need our support.
Yes.
Okay.
Councilman Haney, excuse me, what is his title, Greg Bergman's title?
I have it down
please?
here as Deputy Director of County of Ventura, and he oversees the GSA area.
Okay, thank you.
Don't ask me what GSA stands for.
General services.
Yeah, general
General
services.
services.
something, yeah. Okay, so that's on one track, okay? Just some quick things on pickleball real quick. USAPA, United States Association of Pickleball. They have a national membership. It has grown 650% over the last 6 years. It's growing on an annual basis of 10% a year. There's close to 600,000 people of members. Now, I was looking online, I think the reason is the membership's only $20. That's a pretty good
Yeah,
win.
it's pretty
But
good.
it's just the reality of it is, guys, it's happening. And we need to recognize that. We don't need to turn this community from a tennis associated, world-renowned activity, or lack for a better term, but that we are known for that. And we're never gonna lose that. And I think that's part of the fear I hear, that if somehow this thing is gonna take away something from this.
Right.
And that's why we get defensive rather than figuring out how can we work together to co-create something. We're not going to lose that tournament. We're not gonna do anything to create an environment that says, don't come here and don't have the Pac-12 tournament championship. And we're just not gonna do that.
Can't.
We can't, we won't.
Can't do
And it's not, and that's not in anyone's plans.
Right.
So, and maybe because I brought this up, maybe I need to be clearer on that to some of the people on the tennis side. And I am reaching out to them.
But there is an opportunity here, like I mentioned, to get ahead of this thing.
Yes.
And not necessarily create something as, you're never going to create anything as good or as big as the Ojai tennis tournament, but it gives us the opportunity to maybe become a pickleball tournament destination, which brings revenue to the city,
Yes.
hotels, the restaurants,
Yeah.
all that kind of thing. So
I
there is an
told you,
opportunity here.
My sister's a nationally ranked member. She travels all over the United States for tournaments, just like the one gentleman said that he had just.
Tim Kraut, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it just is. So it just behooves us to recognize it and say, what can we do? Without dropping the ball on what we do.
Right.
And that's support the Ojai tennis tournament. So there's a couple things that we're gonna do, that the council is gonna do, and I'm gonna be bringing it to council's attention, and these are it, I'll just let you guys know. We're gonna look at the public versus private use policies and procedures. So we're gonna get a clear understanding of how a for-profit company can utilize a community center or a community.
Facility.
Yeah, and what's the win in it for the community? So we're gonna assess exactly what these contracts are, we're gonna look at them, and we're gonna look at the win in them. You know, if we're getting a percentage of how many students they serve, we need to know how many students they're serving. The list that you guys got shows you the hours of operation. Those hours aren't posted anywhere.
Right.
So if any of us decide that we want to go play pickleball or even go play tennis, and we show up and they're using the courts, we don't know, so now we just spent all of this time preparing and thinking that we're gonna have a family outing to be told by someone that we don't know.
Well, when you say they're not posted, you mean like, they're posted on the courts? So you think
Like on
of
a
different
website or
posting?
Right, they're
On a
not
website?
posted so I can plan.
Yeah.
It's unless I go to the court. Oh, well, I'm sorry, I
Right.
didn't make the 1 to 2 o'clock time frame, so that
Right,
makes it.
right.
Like on the website, for example.
So there's something so those are things we need to look at, and we are. We're going to, again, I think the contract review, how long we let these contracts for. I don't want to take any of that purview out of the Recreation and Parks Department, but I don't know what the policy is. So we need to
Are
see
you
it.
speaking more in terms of priority use versus,
Public versus private.
but as far as programming a private paying contractor versus?
All of it.
Okay.
We are gonna look at all of it, and we're gonna bring that information back to you. Okay? Because you guys need to be able to make recommendations to us, regarding new procedures, new policies, and things of that nature.
But is it an emphasis on priority, is what I'm asking?
Is it a priority?
Is it an emphasis on priority as to who gets to use those facilities over one another?
We're gonna give you information, and we'll let you guys make that determination.
I just would like to just mention something along those lines. When we were in Carpinteria, I asked about the tennis court because the beautiful court, locked, padlocks on.
Mhm.
The people that live in Carpinteria cannot use those courts unless they previously make an appointment. In other words, I want court time at such and such a time. There's always a lock on there. And I thought, oh,
So that's a policy.
that is a
The
policy.
city of Carpinteria
Yeah.
has come to because their community and citizens have agreed that's how they want to treat that one court.
That's the only place to play.
Well, and
in
that's what I'm trying to say.
Carpinteria,
So
you
that's
know?
how they've decided that they're gonna lessen the wear and tear. Or whatever their reasoning behind their policy, but that's their policy. We have community courts. Our policy is right now that those courts belong to the community.
Yeah.
Now we've got to figure out how to balance that use with the tournament, which we all recognize has a priority. And now we've got to take a look at our Recreation and Parks program and how that plays into it. And then we got to look at any other sources utilizing that facility for profit. So I think it's important that we do that. And I don't think we've had that discussion.
Not in a long time.
Not in a long time.
And are you doing this with staff?
We're going to be doing that through staff. We've already started the process.
Would you be open to a commissioner being in to hear that discussion?
Not yet.
Okay.
We're going to bring any all information that we get, I'm going to share.
Okay.
That's why I'm sharing these thoughts with you now, and I'm sharing with it publicly.
No, I think that's good. I think it's good.
The maintenance responsibilities, I keep hearing that certain groups perform the maintenance, yet I see our city staff maintaining these courts. If there's a maintenance agreement, I want to see what it is. You know, we deserve that right. You deserve that right to see these contracts and to understand how we arrived at them. And if we're sharing the maintenance of these facilities, what's the ratio? What's mine, what's yours? And I think that's clear. I don't know what that is, so we've asked for that contract too, if there is one.
Well, I know in the past history, even going back to when I did it, there's a lot of times where I washed courts and swept courts. I know Rick Thompson did the same thing when he
Scott
was the
does
pro
now.
here. I think Scott probably does it too.
Scott does
So
it.
I was,
Part of the contract says that. I do have Mr. Burton's contract.
yeah.
And it says that.
Yep.
But it doesn't clearly define what
employment
maintenance
contract?
is.
that what you're referring to?
He's a contractor.
Well, I mean,
He's the director of tennis for the
Don't say
city.
that.
don't say that.
For the city of
Don't say
Ojai.
that. Don't say that.
But realistically, you're saying he has a contract with the city of Ojai to run a tennis program at Libby, and he gets paid by the city for those services. That's what, He does.
We have probably 15 different independent contractors, pottery,
Right.
fencing.
providing a service and,
Providing a service for the city, and they get a percentage.
And we
the
get a
city
percentage.
keeps a
Got it.
percentage.
Right.
Okay.
And that has been.
That was the way it was
quite
when I
honest,
did it. Right. Same thing.
It's been 16 years of that. Not to say that 16 years of it doesn't need to change. I'm just saying.
And we're not looking to change. What we're doing is we're just looking to see what is.
Yeah.
And what are our ratios?
Yeah.
And if we're letting a contract out to a private entity to generate money off of our community asset, is it a win for the community? You know, we got to weigh that.
Yeah.
Their wear and tear is probably just as much as our wear and tear. So if we don't know what it is, we can't make these assessments.
I'm going to say if we do, most cities run their programming this way.
I'm
Yeah.
not
With
questioning
this-
how we're doing
yeah.
it. All I'm questioning is what are
Right.
the results of it?
Yeah, with
And we
similar
should-
percentages, similar
Okay.
contracts, anyway.
Right.
So anyway, the bottom line is that once you receive this information, you know.
Then
if
we're
it-
gonna,
if
then
it-
we're
if it-
gonna, we're gonna bring it, we'll share it with the
If it
commission.
works, then don't change it.
If it's beneficial or if we need change or something, but we'll definitely bring it to council, that's for sure.
You know.
And then the last thing in that, you know, when it comes to that is, again, just recognizing we're not here. My goal is not to harm the tennis. My goal is to provide transparency as to how these courts operate. And so that the public knows exactly what is their role and what is the private people's role. And I think it's important. We're even gonna look at the $10,000 that they donate a year. You know, where does it go to? How is it spent? How's it utilized?
How many years have they done that? And it's not to question their integrity, it's to find out, what are we doing? And I think it's a fair question. And it's a fair question for you. So, the other thing, so we're good on there, we know that, pickleball is here to stay. One thing I think you guys could have done tonight, you could have addressed, Mr. Grant and asked him to actually do a quick,
Cost. We have the
dollar assessment.
No,
on that.
yeah,
assessment.
and not his, he could have, listen,
City court,
yeah,
the city tennis.
I could call up 3 asphalt contractors who do tennis courts and say, give me a price on overlay and striping. I could do that
You're
personally.
referring to the tennis court on city property?
Yeah.
Mhm. Which I still am kind of unclear about there
What
not
it
being
is.
any parking. I don't understand.
Well, there's
They
street
can-
parking, but there's not.
Well, it's,
But it's on Montgomery?
It's right
or
here.
it's on?
Right,
it's-
no,
Right outside
Yeah,
this
so
door.
why
If
can't they
you
park out
walked,
here?
Well, if
Can't.
you come here during
Oh,
the day,
okay, well,
they
that's what
can.
I was
You'd walk
confused.
30 feet
Right.
to your,
Again-
outside
Right,
the store.
but the
you-
parking lot is
Par-
right there,
Yeah, I don't think
right?
parking is
Okay.
an issue, again,
Okay.
because we own all this land.
Yeah.
We could do whatever we want to accommodate parking.
But it's
for that
walking
facility.
distance from that
Yes,
parking
it
lot?
is.
Okay,
Yes, it is.
I didn't,
So,
From City Hall's parking lot.
yes.
I'll be honest with you, it was the Mayor Johnson who even brought that up, and it was like, once he brought it up, it was like, well, this is almost a no-brainer.
Right.
We have it, alls we need to recondition it.
Yeah.
And we don't need a $250,000 tear out and put back in.
Actually, I think at the last meeting, Mr. Kraut gave an estimate on it, and it was 12,000, I want to say. It was that, and
So,
I think that was even for a
If
new
we're gonna
court.
do some joint fundraising, or we're gonna do some joint things with the community, it'd be nice to know what the number is so that we have a goal to fundraise to. So,
That is so ideal. I don't understand why, the pickleball people didn't want to investigate that.
Oh, they're investigating everything,
Oh,
but
yeah.
you also have the issue with lights.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to put lights there, and how's that gonna impact the neighborhood, and how's that gonna impact?
yeah, the police station is probably gonna hate it.
Mhm.
But again, you gotta start somewhere.
Right.
But so you look at that, you look at Seoul, you look at a joint use with the school district.
Cool, yeah.
There's a multitude of things to look at, and that's why you guys are so smart to create an ad hoc committee, and that's what you'll do, you'll go
Well,
investigate.
we've recommended that one be created. So we look to council to come back on that. That's what our recommendation was. Is
Not to create it.
No, our recommendation is to, to you, was to
Right. and we're-
direct us to
and-
create one.
And we're gonna help you with that.
Thank you.
We're gonna guide you through that creation.
Thank you very much.
And I plan to be very helpful with that, but, okay. So there's a lot on your plate, and again, that's why it's so great to see a commission when they're at it, when they're really working. And you guys are working it, so again, thank you. Greg Grant, if there's one thing Greg Grant does well, he looks for money. So when you heard him talk tonight about finding $260-some thousand to be able to do those, what are we going?
Multi-sport courts.
But
Futsal.
It's
Not
foot.
futsal.
I know what it is, and Bill Wyrick asked me that. He goes, "What is that? How do you say it? Is it futsal or faisal or?"
Futsal.
And I go, it's a soccer court.
It's a multi-sport court.
So, but he's good at that. And again, I would, if he said 6 weeks, I would say hop on that as a commission, if you can. And then the other thing is, I think, Susie, you said it, well, if you come up with that money, that means there's 250 if we do it in the CIP, can't we do something else? And maybe that's where we look at, some type of a funding for that pickleball or for something else.
More long-term.
So, yeah, you guys put it out to 2021, and I understand why. Watch, the CIP is just it's a list, it's a what if, it's a, please, can we? Doesn't matter what year you put it on, you still make the choice as what the priority is. And guys, I think that's it, other than Sophocles. Once again, thank you for all that you've done, and
It's been my pleasure.
yeah, you really stepped up. I remember all the turmoil that happened when you
Yeah.
moved in, and you did a great job
Thanks.
in that moment, and you've continued to do a great job for us.
Thank you. Thank you. It's,
It's been wonderful.
Okay, my 3 minutes might be up.
yeah. Well, for
Thank you.
a little bumpkin from a 24-year-old kid coming from Maine, which I was when I first moved to Ojai. It's been a great run for me, starting at Ojai Valley School for many years and then transitioning over to the city. And I've met the greatest people, both staff, families, kids. It's been really a dream job, both jobs, when I worked at OVS and now with the city. And it is definitely bittersweet, and I'm going to miss a lot of the hardworking people at the recreation department. They are solid there. It won't, I won't discredit myself, but it won't skip a beat, because I think they're pretty. The Allisons, the Christies, the people who have been there, the Jeff Grahams, folks who have been there a long time. Vicky, I'd be remiss if I didn't say Vicky, and Stacy. Those core people who have been there for 10 or more years can drive that department. I'm not saying we don't need a rec manager, but they could run that department for a little while without too much trouble. But they've got a great future. We just want to keep the momentum ahead. As Randy said, this body and the work you provide, I know sometimes you feel maybe disconnected or things move too slowly. No. But you make a difference. We respect, we appreciate the input that you give, and we do use it. So me to you, thank you. I'll miss you guys. I certainly will be in around Ojai. My mother-in-law lives here. My daughter actually just put an offer in on a place in Miramonte. So I'm going to be around. I plan on making a couple of cameos during summer camp, and maybe even get involved in the basketball program, which is where I originally started with my 8-year-old daughter. So
And work on your ping pong.
And I'll work on my ping pong. I'll have plenty of time to work on my ping pong game, get back into basketball. And do volunteer.
We will sign you up as a volunteer.
Yeah.
Say something about ping pong that's real interesting.
Uh-oh.
I'm a jock at heart and retired pretty much 100% now, but I used to always say, if you can't play ping pong, you're not an athlete. It takes a lot of skill.
It does.
I
I played many hours of ping pong with Council Member Blatz at Ojai Valley School. I can tell you that. Anyway, hey, there's some pizza in the kitchen. I mean, it seems like it's probably all cold by now.
That's
but,
okay.
I'm going to go. Are we adjourned, or what are we?
Future agenda items, I think.
Oh, future agenda items. Right, because someone's got to.
I think some people might like to speak, right?
Okay.
Yeah, no.
Thank you.
Definitely, I think, first off, congratulations.
Thank you.
And a big thank you for everything you've done for the city, and specifically for the rec department. I've seen it as a commissioner and as a customer and a parent. I see kind of the rapport you have with everyone who goes through the programming at the department and the success of the department. So thank you for all of that.
Sure. My pleasure. Again.
Yeah, and also, as a former chair of the commission, I think it's easy to overlook the work that goes into preparing for these meetings, and all of that falls on Sophocles and Allison. But there's a lot of work to prepare, line up people to show up at the meetings, prepare the documents for the meetings. So thank you for all of that. I appreciate
You're welcome. And again, it comes as a team effort too. I don't want to take all the credit, but there is a lot. Like tonight, I was thinking, where is my personal assistant? Because I'm not being dramatic here. Sometimes the programming side suffers when you're doing the admin side, and that's the challenge in a small company. The challenge in a small department is trying to do the admin work and not having all the staffing you necessarily need to do that. Well, thank you. Yeah,
well, and I would
there's time that goes
ditto on that, but I also just want to say that I think they're huge, huge shoes to fill, and it's hard to communicate all that you did and all that you touched, because you were a manager, but you were a working manager, and you knew the kids, and you knew all the employees, and you were in touch with the heart of what Ojai's Recreation Department was. And thank you for being the heart of that program for so long.
Thank you.
We will miss you, and it's going to be a hard, I don't know how we're going to fill your shoes.
Thank you.
But,
I
thank you.
enjoyed being a kid when it was time to be a kid. Man, I loved being, and I'm going to miss camp.
But have a wonderful retirement.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm
I
glad
will.
you're coming back for a little of this and that.
I will.
That's
I'll
good.
cameo.
Well, and I first met you when you were at OVS, playing basketball, if you recall. We played against each other, then I refereed with you, so I've known you for quite a while.
Yeah.
I just want to thank you for talking me off the ledge a couple times.
Yeah,
Since I joined this commission, and this is tough for me because I like stuff to happen fast.
Yeah.
And it's worked on my patience a little bit, but hopefully we'll see you. I think we will.
I'll be around.
And again, I appreciate everything. I grew up in that club. We've talked about this before. I grew up at the Boyd Center. I've been there since I was 10 years old. So when you came in after Carol left, it was pretty much a lot of upheaval there, and you sort of righted the ship, and it's been relatively smooth sailing, I think, since that. So thank you for all that. I have a lot of emotional attachment to that place, so it's nice to see it run smoothly.
Great.
So appreciate it.
Thanks.
I'm disappointed you weren't wearing a toga. That's how I picture you. That's how I pictured you since day one.
I got pizza delivered to the council, the council chambers. I wanted actually the pizza guy to walk in all the way in.
That'd have been good, but
anyway.
Well, okay.
All
Thank
right.
you very
Well-
much. I think we can officially adjourn now and go to future.
Future agenda items?
Yes, please.
Do you want to?
We have.
Sorry to.
It's going to be crickets next meeting since you're not going to be.
Yeah, it will be super crickets. I'm sure it'll be someone running the
Have to
meeting.
set them?
No,
Just make sure
we
you
can just
forward
mention
them
what they
our email.
are.
Yeah, let's say what you'd like.
I'd like to get I'd like to get a cost on the pickleball from city staff. I'd like to ask for that to be a discussion.
So Greg Grant, pickleball.
I'd just like to know from, rehab, what it potential
costs
rehab
for
up
the
there.
city
Yes.
court.
Yeah,
for the Ojai City Hall court.
Correct. And
Maybe you could
rehab
also
and,
look at Seoul. Can you do that, do you think?
no, we wouldn't be able to do
No.
any, well, I think that Councilman
that's
Haney
it.
recommended.
Yeah, they're going to have a meeting and they.
I just
But
would like to know
the-
if we, cost to get that
Included in
going.
that, it might be worth asking him if he has any other ideas for locations.
Possible locations from Greg.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah,
and
he's great.
Maybe costs, if he has other
Locations and costs. Wow.
It's late.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
all
Meeting
right.
adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you, soft please.
Thank you.
I'll
go hit the record.
I took my.
I'm glad we could drag out your last.
Yeah, I know. So I would have it no other way.
Let's try.
Been there more than once. I get up at 4 o'clock just to go to work every morning.
Yeah, they
It's been a heck of a couple of months for being sick, mine included.
So sorry. That's awful. Okay, I got
Everything
bit.
turn out okay?
I think I got a mosquito bite while I was in here.
Wow.
Oh, no, get you some pizza. No, I had at least one slice. No, and that'll mess up my girlish figure.
Yeah.
It's like nice to have concrete information.
Yeah, and what was really nice was
Thank you.
how perceptive the mayor was.
Yeah,
Very.
yeah.
So,
It's,
it's something
Right.
that I think
What-
he would love to would like to have happen in his,
yeah, he's also spoke to us specifically from his experiences at the county